Chapter 151 Hypertoxic. Qing Yun Hill, Tong Tien Peak. The tea fragrance curled upwards, continuously from the spotlessly white teacup with greenish-black tip and green cover. The tea which had just been steeped was steaming with traces of white steam, dispersing into the room. This was the one of the secluded room in the rear rooms of the Crystal Hall. The current day most powerful and prestigious three masters were gathered in this room, calmly sipping tea and discussing. The Qing Yun disciples who had served the tea had quietly retreated, leaving only Reverend Dao Zan, Puhong Master and Yun Yil and the three of them. Reverend Dao Zan was the first to speak, smiled and said, "This tea is a specialty from a place near Qing Yun Hill. Although it is nothing rare, but it is also considered an fragrant quality produce. Both has tried it. What do you all think?" Yun Yilin put down his cup, nodded and said, "The fragrance remains in the throat, like flowing ceaselessly from the mouth into the stomach. It is indeed a good tea." Reverend Dao Zan laughed and said, "If Yun senior brother likes it, in the future after this evil beast calamity is over, just bring some of it back to Fenshang Valley." Yun Yilin smiled, nodded and said, "That will be the best, Reverend. You can't go back on your words when the time comes." The two of them smiled at each other. Puhong Master instead chanted beside them. Reverend Dao Zan looked over at him and said, "What is it, Master?" Puhong Master sighed and said, "Actually, I also know that when facing such calamity, we have to maintain a calm state of mind so that we can deal with it with composure. However, the Buddha is compassionate. Once I think of the common people right now are in such dire straits, I cannot help but feel anxious. I have forget myself, both please do not mind." Yun Yilin's face slightly changed. A glint also flashed past Reverend Daoshuan's eyes, but his face too turned solemn soon after. Looking at Puhong Master, Reverend Dao Zan slowly said, "Master is right. Since we claim ourselves to be the good faction, naturally we should take up the responsibility of the common people. Excuse me for my impropriety." Puhong Master placed his palms together and shook his head, quietly said, "You're too kind, Reverend. I did not mean to blame Reverend just now." Yun Yilin's face expression by now had returned to normal, smiled and said, all right, look at both of your genteel behavior. Isn't it more unbearable? We better not say any more superfluous words, quickly get to the main topic." Reverend Dao Zan and Puhong Master laughed. Reverend Dao Zan nodded and said, "Yun senior brother is right. In fact, I invited both here today for discussion, is for this evil beast calamity. There seems to be strange changes." Yun Yilin and Puhong Master were surprised. Yun Yilin said, "What changes, Reverend, please say?" Reverend Dao Zan, looking solemn, said, "A few days ago I sent Xiao Yikai, Lin Jingyu and other capable disciples to investigate on the evil beast's situation. In the end they only just came back yesterday night but reported a very unusual thing." Master Puhong saw Reverend Daoshuan's solemn face with some puzzlement, could not help but ask, "What happened?" Reverend Dao Zan paused and said, "According to Yikai, those demon beasts that came from the south and attacked Central Plains, has always headed straight here, massacring along the way. But recently for some reasons, suddenly a large number of beasts stopped and started to head southwest, and the number of beasts that continue to move to our north direction, seems like there are only 40% of the original numbers." Yun Yilin pondered a moment, said, "The southwest direction, isn't there where the evil sect has always been running wild?" Reverend Dao Zan nodded and said, "That's right. Now that the evil sect is separated into three factions, Wandu clan, Ghost King sect and Heihuan sect fighting interminably, even though we do not know where their headquarters are, but from the clues, the three headquarters are all at southwest, therefore that is where the evil sect's power has always concentrated in. And this time the evil beasts suddenly headed towards that direction in a large group. I wonder what had exactly happened." Puhong Master frowned, said, "Could it be that the demon beasts and the evil sect already have some conflicts and has some losses, therefore they are heading there in forces to give support?" Reverend Dao Zan, his expression heavy, said, "It is not clear at the moment, but if it is so, it would be the best. Both the demon beasts and the evil sect are scourge. If they fight with each other, it is to the benefit of the common people." Yun Yilin suddenly shook his head, said, "Both sect heads, I think it is not as simple as it seemed." Reverend Dao Zan glanced at him and said, "Oh, Yun Valley Master, please enlighten." Yun Yilin said, "You and I are well aware that the people of evil sect have been selfish. To say that they are fighting with the demon beast for the sake of the common people, I think this is impossible." Seeing both Reverend Dao Zan and Puhong Master also nodding slightly, Yun Yilin smiled, then said, "On the contrary, from my understanding of the evil sect, now that they know the mighty force of the demon beast, not to mention being their foe. Even if the demon beasts inadvertently hurt them, I'm afraid they would rather bear it quietly and retreat. Better to let us the good faction handle these savage demon beasts. Reverend Daozan nodded and said, yes, Yun Valley Master is right, but a large number of demon beasts did head to southwest. In Yun Valley Master's opinion, why is this so? Yun Yilin was silent for a moment, in a deep voice said, from the past behaviors of the demon beasts heading into the central plains, they do not have any specific objectives and have only been killing along the road, all the way north. So this time they changed direction suddenly. There must be something odd. It must be one of the demon beasts near southwest suffered some big disadvantage and that evildoer called beast deity mobilize a large number of beasts to the southwest. But in the southwest, other than Central Plains evil sect, there are no other powerful figure, therefore I guessed, most probably within the evil sect, some unusual change has happened. Kuhong Master's white brows frowned, said, unusual change, what does Valley Master means? Yun Yilin laughed, said, this is not something I can know. Kuhong Master smiled, shook his head, after speaking for half a day, Yun Patron, aren't you speaking in vain? All of a sudden, all three of them laughed, but after a moment, Reverend Daozan, after contemplating, said, actually it seems to me that not all Yun Senior Brother says doesn't matter. No matter what, now that a large number of demon beasts headed to the southwest, the pressure before us has also reduced much, at least we can save some time. Now that the world is looking towards us with hope, we have to take some action to let the world see. Yun Yilin glanced at Reverend Daozan, said, oh, is it that Reverend want us to take advantage of the weakened demon beast's force and give a good fight? Reverend Daozan with a grim expression said, yes, one less demon, the world will have less of a misery, such responsibility is naturally our good faction. Kuhong Master quietly chanted, a mocking expression quietly flashed past Yun Yilin's eyes and then turned awe-inspiring, said, Reverend is extremely right and so we will follow Reverend's arrangement, my Fenshong Valley is willing to be the vanguard. Reverend Daozan smiled and said, with Yun Valley Master this sincerity, why should we worry the demon beasts being unbeaten? However, over at the southwest, I have pondered for a long time, I feel there is something mysterious about this, although we cannot rashly intervene, but if we ignore it, it seems inappropriate. Kuhong Master nodded, said, yes, I am thinking the same thing. After all, the demon beast's calamity has plunged the world into misery. What had exactly happened in the southwest? We should at least know what's going on. Yun Yilin said, since so, why don't we send some higher skilled disciples, secretly follow over to get some information? Reverend Daozan nodded his head and said, all right, let's decide it that way then. At this moment, Yun Yilin seemed to recall something, suddenly said to Reverend Daozan, oh right, there is one more thing, that still need to seek a favor from Reverend. Reverend Daozan said, Yun Valley Master is too polite, what is it? You can speak your mind. Yun Yilin smiled and said, I heard that your honorable sect Small Bamboo Valley disciple, Lu Shuiqi, has been punished to face the wall and reflect on herself at Small Bamboo Valley Full Moon platform. After I knew about it, my heart really felt disturbed, and... He smiled and said, that useless disciple of mine has been coming to see me every few days and pleading with me, said that he does not bear to see Miss Lu being punished because of our request. Moreover, now that the demon beasts are causing misery to the world, it is a time where talented people are needed and Miss Lu is an outstanding disciple of Qing Yun. Why don't Reverend on my behalf, temporarily exempt Miss Lu from her punishment? Reverend Daozan sighed and said, it is all because of my lax discipline that this turns out into a joke in front of Yun Valley Master. Yun Yilin smiled and said, Reverend, you are too polite, it is only my foolish disciple wishful delusion only, and the matters between the junior generations, it is better if we simply don't meddle, we have less things to worry. After speaking, he laughed out loud. Reverend Daozan contemplated for a moment, said, since Yun Valley Master personally pleaded for her, I definitely have to give this face. Why not like this? Today I will let Shuiqi come back, at the same time pick a few disciples to go with her to southwest to investigate, considered it as redeeming her mistakes. Yun Yilin's lips showed a hint of smile, said, ah. What a coincidence, I just wanted to say that I want to let my useless disciple, Li Xuan, to go to southwest to gain experience. Reverend Daozan looked at him, lightly said, then let them go together. Yun Yilin laughed loudly, cupped his hands together, said, then I first thank Reverend on behalf of my useless disciple. Reverend Daozan turned around, picked up the teacup from the table, slowly drank a mouthful, his eyes changed into an unpredictable look, slowly said, Valley Master is too polite. Southwest Venomous Serpent Valley. This huge valley was surrounded by dense ancient forests. Most of the year, when it was dawn and evening, a miasma similar would emit from the forests. Those were actually the valley's numerous poisonous snakes' breaths. Nobody knew the reason for the abundant number of poisonous serpents in this valley. Their number had reached to a point where they were everywhere in the trees and on the ground. Only that Wandu clan residents within the valley, because of the secret spell of Wandu clan, forced these snakes to stay away. And these mountain full of snakes also turned into a natural barrier for Wandu clan and an inexhaustible treasure of poison. At the moment, it was one of the day's dawn. Above the dense forest of the valley, a faint colorful miasma could be seen rising indistinctly. It looked at the morning mist in the early morning, but if an ignorant person walked near it, a moment later his face 7 apertures would bleed and he would die from the toxic, finally buried with the snake's kiss. In the usual days, other than these snakes guarding the valley, Wandu clan had always had disciples patrolling the place, guarding against intruders. However, for the past few days, for some reasons, there was no disciples. Seemed like the internal conflicts in Wandu clan had already turned white hot. Pa, a gentle sound, a small stone rolled over, outside the valley from that only, at the same time already dilapidated, overgrown with weeds ancient path, jumped twice and rolled into the grasses beside and disappeared. And then, following a light footstep sounds, 3 tall, big but strange beasts appeared on the road. They were all savage wolf heads, but their bodies were of a panther, looking extremely strange. These 3 monsters looked to be careful, their noses constantly twitching, as if sniffing something in the air, slowly approaching the venomous Serpent Valley. And the valley was quiet, like completely caught off guard against the arrival of these 3 uninvited guests. Suddenly, one of the monsters, wolf head, startled, like it had discovered something, and followed by a low roar. The other 2 monsters immediately stopped and looked towards the most sturdy tall monster standing in the middle. The wolf-head monster's eyes flashed with menacing glare, its nose sniffing constantly, but it did not walk into the valley, instead slowly walked towards an area of dense patch of grasses beside the path, a faint smell of blood, slowly emanating from the grasses. The monster, with a low roar, stepped into the grass. Looking from the outside, the monster's body kept moving, as if rummaging in the grass to find something. After a while, a stir of movement from the grasses, that sturdy monster jumped out and back to the path, and in its mouth, it was biting a strange thing. It looked like a long whip, like some kind of monster's tail. The top of its fur had begun to rot, its color dull, the smell of blood constantly emanating. The other 2 monsters at the same time growled, apparently surprised and angry, their eyes flashing with menace. The monster placed the thing on the path, suddenly lifted its head up and gave a long howl, like a wolf's howl, sharp and mournful, straight up the sky. A moment later, that monster again held the thing in its mouth, disregarding the other 2, ran swiftly towards the back, leaving the valley. And the other 2 monsters, after roaring a few times, suddenly dashed into the valley. The ancient path was twisted and narrow, stretched ahead, brambles grown thickly on both sides of the forest, faint colorful miasma drifted among it. The beasts dashed straight ahead, looking at them, gashing their teeth. If there was someone in front of them right now, most likely they would be torn to pieces. The colorful miasma gently floated, slowly gathering in the forest. The 2 beasts roared again and again, not even a glance, and directly rushed into it. Initially nothing happened, but for some reasons, their roars gradually became softer, running slower and slower. In the next moment their bodies started to shake. Realizing something was wrong, the 2 beasts stopped and with difficulty turned their heads around, wanted to leave this forest, but before they could walk out a few steps, they collapsed. Blood flowed out of the 7 apertures on their faces, looked like they would not survive. In the middle of the forest, distantly, hair-raising sounds were heard approaching. Within a short while, numerous snake heads appeared from the branches of the trees, hissing sounds accompanied. Big and small snakes slithered over. And while these snakes were happily vying for their food, suddenly, many stopped their actions, raised their heads in alert, and then moved towards the entrance valley. On that desolate ancient path, a faint low drum sounds could be heard from afar. The entire earth slowly began to tremble. Strange sounds, like thousands of troops moving, came from the far distance. In the early morning of the valley, suddenly it plunged into a deadly silence. Who, letting out a long breath fiercely, the first disciple of God of Poison, Fan Chong, fiercely swung his hand, throwing aside a Wandu clan disciple's corpse whose skull had been smashed by him. The body flew through the air, with a pong sound, slammed onto the offering table in the morning hall and dropped down. Like a devilish sneer in the world of spirits, or maybe it was intended to make an offering to the god of poison, this evil sect clan leader who killed people like flies, at the morning hall where the god of poison coffin laid, right now had turned into a river of blood, thousands of disciples, corpses lying everywhere. The thick smell of human blood floated in the air. Right now, the 3 disciples of god of poison, Fan Shang, Cheng Wuya and Duan Rusan's men had already been fighting for several days. Other than a few higher skilled leaders leading, half of the ordinary disciples were dead or injured, and these days of fighting had already caused these 3 who vying for power, their eyes to turn red, almost turning berserk. And on the offering table in the morning hall, the box which contained the clan seal, was still lying there quietly, coldly watching it all. Seemed like they were tired from killing. The battles inside and outside the hall gradually subsided, but the swords drawn bow bent tense atmosphere instead turned even more tensed. Lao San, Duan Russian, clustered around by 4 strange-looking elders, his eyes glaring, looking at Fan Shang and Cheng Wuya in front of him, sneered, "I say 2 senior brothers," still refusing to stop. "Now apart from those old men beside you, who else do you still have?" Fan Shang and Cheng Wuya looked at each other. Both saw a trace of despair in each other's red eyes. Ever since from the night of the 7th day, the strange sounds from the morning hall, the 3 factions who were already on standby immediately rushed into the morning hall in force, for fear that they might be one step too late and the official deal would be taken by someone else. And in that chaotic situation, countless people burst into the hall. Naturally each thought the other party had already premeditated to undermine their agreement and came to rob the seal. Within 2 or 3 words the fight had already started. And so far, the results of the 3 factions' battle finally started to become clear. Lao San Duan Russian, who had always been the one with poorer skills, with the solid strength in his hands, slowly suppressed Fan Shang and Cheng Wuya. Now, other than those standing behind them, Bai Duji, blood-sucking demon, Elder Duanmu etc. less than 10 people, they had no more chips in their hands. And Duan Russian not only had Poison Clan 4 elders as bodyguards, in light and dark, he had at least 100 over men, among them many were elites. The solid power of Wandu clan, 60% was actually all on Duan Russian's hands, even more than what he had before the battle. It was really beyond their expectations. Watching helplessly as the situation had been decided, Fan Shang and Cheng Wuya's eyes were full of reluctance, but in the end they had nothing to say. Looking at his 2 senior brothers' expressions, Duan Russian could not help laughing out loud. Above him he always had 2 overbearing senior brothers, and below, that Qin Wuyan whom his teacher god of poison doted more than anything, only he was ignored, for so many years. Finally he had his day. How could he not be ecstatic? Duan Russian swagged with arrogance forward, the Poison Clan 4 protectors around him. Fan Shang and Cheng Wuya watched him walk to the offering table, standing before the box, one clenching his fist, another gritting his teeth, obviously full of resentment. But to Duan Russian, their anger at the moment undoubtedly were the victor's favorite. He even felt that with such a moment where he ruled over all of the people, he did not live in vain. Duan Russian laughed, his attitude conceited, proudly reached out his hand and grabbed the green box in his hand. Fan Shang and Cheng Wuya made low growls at the same time, stepped forward 1 step, but 4 elders immediately turned towards them. At the same time Duan Russian's men with a hula sound rushed over, surrounded them. Both of their eyes looked like fire was about to spew out. Watched that box from a distance. Duan Russian laughed even more conceitedly, proudly twisted open the lock, opened the box. Inside the box, golden silk lined the bottom, a dark brown small seal sat in the middle, a lifelike snake engraved on top of the seal. Although he did not flip it over, but everyone there including Duan Russian knew, underneath the seal, 4 words were engraved. God of Poison Seal. Duan Russian arrogantly looked around, pausing longer on Fan Shang and Cheng Wuya's faces, soaking in the delight of a victor. Duan Russian smiled, although the smile looked weird and savage because of the blood on his face. He picked up the seal, turned it over. He wanted to take a good look at this symbol representing the highest power and authority of the Wandu clan. At that moment, other than Fan Shang and Cheng Wuya's angry pants, there was no sound in the hall, watching the birth of the new generation of Wandu clan leader. Suddenly, when the crowd was holding their breaths, Duan Russian uttered a piercing roar. The box and that important seal fell to the ground. Everyone was shocked, looked towards him and all gasped with astonishment. Duan Russian, who was just being insufferably arrogant, right now his entire body was quivering, his face devoid of color, especially his 2 hands, in a blink turned into an extremely strange color of dark black. The next moment, a low insect wing flapping sound emitted from his hands, a strange flying insect flew up from his fingers. Not one present was not a veteran of Wandu clan. The insect flew extremely fast, but almost all could see it clearly. Baiduji was the first to exclaim, "Seven-tailed centipede, seven-tailed centipede." This cry, like a soul-stirring roar, shocked everyone. All of them looked at Duan Rushan. The shaking in his body had turned worse. An elder beside him intended to pull him, but his fingers had only slightly touched his clothes. Suddenly his body shook, with a scream flew back out. The next instant his right hand had turned black. Standing in the distance, blood-sucking demon's pupils contracted, roughly said, "Rotting flesh liverwort." The elder who was poisoned cried out in surprise. An elder next to him without hesitation, grasped beside him a broken leg of some chair, struck down his right hand. With his high skills, that chair leg, like a solid sword tip, chopped off that poisoned elder's right arm and then immediately threw that chair leg away, as if a second late and his own hand would also suffer the same fate. The chair leg flew in the air and everyone scrambled to avoid it. Right now Duan Rushan's face was full of black energy. Everyone clearly saw that the two hands which had turned completely black, with a pop sound, the skin ruptured, even the blood that flowed out was already black. In the next moment, the hair-raising puff, puff, puffed sounds unceasingly. Duan Rushan, who was poisoned with the most toxic venom in the world, his skin and flesh burst opened, black blood spewed out, he fell slumped to the ground, after struggling for a moment, never moved again. Fan Shang stared blankly at this junior brother, who was just a moment ago extremely savage and right now dead, suddenly turned back and shouted, "Qin Wuyan, you this treacherous beast, get out." Everyone suddenly realized with a start, rotting flesh liverwort was highly toxic, one of the world's most hypertoxic thing. Even in Wandu clan, only God of Poison himself could handle it. Fan Shang, Cheng Wuya, Duan Rushan with their limited skills could not use this item. And the seven-tailed centipede was an absolutely rare poisonous thing and had always kept close to God of Poison. Now that the two most hypertoxic things appeared at the same time, and in God of Poison seal small box, without asking, it must be Qin Wuyan who had fooled everyone, secretly placed the poison. All of a sudden, people in the morning hall were on the alert, looked around them, fearing Qin Wuyan might suddenly appear beside them. Duan Rushan's death was too horrifying, not one was not terrified. At that moment, nobody dared to even breathe loudly, only where Duan Rushan's corpse was, drops of black blood slowly fell. When it hit the ground, it made a slight hissing sound, burning a small dent. In a blink, around the body were small holes, showing that the toxicity of the poison. Hee, what is it? Two senior brothers, various honored elders, we have only not met a few days, it is rare that everyone missed me so much. A calm voice, suddenly from outside the hall traveled in. Everyone was shocked and looked out. Qin Wuyan had changed, removed the hemp garment morning clothes, put on his usual clothes, smiling and unhurriedly walked in. And those sharp-eyed people had already saw, on his shoulder, a tiny strange insect was there. It was the seven-tailed centipede. Fan Shang bitterly said, "You put the poison." Qin Wuyan at the moment ignored everyone, swaggered forward, came to Duan Rushan's corpse, in full view of everyone, stretched his hand and picked up that hypertoxic seal. Fan Shang and Cheng Wuya's eyes shrank. Cheng Wuya sneered, said, "Good. Little junior brother, the three of us really have underestimated you." Qin Wuyan smiled and said, "Two senior brothers must be joking. Actually, with three senior brothers' strength, it is no effort at all to take junior brother's life. Junior brother also do not dare to resist." However, teacher had instructed before he left, said that the Ghost King sect, Heihuan sect are like a tiger eyeing its prey. Three senior brothers are also not capable, said I must take on the clan leader position, to prevent the 100 years of Wandu clan be destroyed in one day. Junior brother me have been brought up by teacher, I am in debt to teacher and do not dare to disobey, therefore had to resort to tricks and made three senior brothers suffered. Fan Shang angrily said, "Pay, so you assume that you have won, I tell you, the first person Lao Zi want to kill is you." After speaking, he turned to Cheng Wuya. "Lao this fellow is too vicious, let's join forces to kill him first, then we will share the world." Cheng Wuya immediately said, "Good, let's go." Among the clamor, both of them looked to about to charge, and behind them, Baiduji, blood-sucking demon, also about to follow. Qin Wuyan indifferently said, "Elders, you have seen now, these senior brothers of mine really cannot hold their patience. All of you are coming over to kill me, not to mention just with seven-tailed centipede and rotting flesh liverwort. Whether can you all defeat me? Even if you all join forces to kill me, following these two useless things, do you all think your lives would be better in the future? Can you all win against Ghost King sect and Heihuan sect? Can you all escape the besiegement of the good faction?" Baiduzi and blood-sucking demon, Elder Duanmu paused stunned. that 2 hypertoxic poisons on Duan Russian, only the person who received Wandu clan poison sutra could use it, although they were in the clan for so many years but they still could not reach that stage. In their hearts in fact they were already in fear of this young Qin Wuyan. Now that they heard his words, they hesitated and did not dare to go forward. And many following Duan Russian, firstly would not follow Fan Xiong and Cheng Wuyan and right now looked at each other, lost at what to do. Qin Wuyan looked at the crowd, smiled and said, "Everyone, I guarantee, as long as I take over the clan, I will definitely not bear grudges. How everyone was previously in the clan, I would definitely treat you the same." Under Fan Xiong and Cheng Wuya's glares, the people looked at each other for a long time and then Bai Duji was the first to back away, followed by Blood-Sucking Demon, Elder Duanmu and the 4 elders etc. also started to walk to the side, leaving only Qin Wuyan, Fan Xiong and Cheng Wuya the 3 brothers standing there. Fan Xiong's face revealed despair, knew the situation was hopeless. Cheng Wuya looked ashen. Qin Wuyan still maintained a faint smile but in his heart he was still feeling indignation. Right now he was not angry at his 2 senior brother but at Kang Song Taoist. He had already set his plan and let the 3 brothers kill themselves but not in such a large-scale fight. As long as his 3 senior brothers were removed, he would easily take over the clan position. Unexpectedly with Kang Song Taoist's meddling, triggering a big battle with the 3 factions, destroying the clan's main strength. Qin Wuyan right now was angry, agonized and regretful, really wished to cut Kang Song Taoist into half however he could only think. Taoist Kang Song had disappeared, Qin Wuyan could only quietly bore it down. But in any case, Qin Wuyan had control of the situation. With a victory smile, he looked at the 2 brothers, leisurely said, "2 senior brothers, are you still not going to seek forgiveness before Teacher's Spirit Tablet?" Chapter 152 Insane. Majestic Fox Mountain, Ghost King Sect Headquarters Location. GG, GG. Xiao Hui's familiar cries rang out in the dim and deep tunnel. From the shadows Ghost Li's figure emerged. On his shoulder, Xiao Wei drank a few mouthfuls from the big bag of wine it was holding and then cleverly tied up the bag's opening, letting it hang down. There was a long rope on the wine bag, just like a cover tied onto the monkey, not afraid of it slipping down. Ghost Li's face was expressionless and walked ahead. The direction he was looking at was where Biao's ice stone room was. Xiao Wei seemed a little drowsy, crouching on his shoulders and yawned. The surroundings of the majestic Fox Mountain were desolate and did not have much wild fruits. Most of the time it could only go to Ghost King Sect wine cellar to steal some wine and drink. It had not been seen for a few days and looked like it had gained some weight. Ghost Li unhurriedly walked. On his way and he encountered only a few Ghost King Sect ordinary disciples. He frowned slightly. These days many of the Ghost King Sect disciples were being gathered and several days ago, led by Ghost King personally, left the mountain. As for where, he was unsure, and the strange thing was, this seemed like a very important matter. This vice leader did not know, and those that followed Ghost King for many years, Yu-Ji, Mr. Ghost, including Taoist Kangsong who had just joined Ghost King Sect, as well as many of the elite Ghost King Sect members that he knew, were all left at Majestic Fox Mountain. Ghost King mysteriously brought a number of many disciples but their strength were actually not even half of Ghost King Sect. Where exactly were they going? Ghost Li felt bewildered. However, Mr. Ghost, Yu-Ji etc. all remained silent. Ghost Li naturally would not ask much and utmost concern was not where Ghost King was going or how important this matter was. To him, Bai Yao was always the first. And now, he was also soon approaching that icy stone chamber. There was nobody at the door. Yu-Ji was also not there. Usually that mysterious woman was most often seen at the cold stone chamber but this period the mood in Ghost King Sect was somehow not right, her frequency also reduced. Ghost Li stood at the door for a while, composed herself and then opened the door and walked in. After entering, he saw a white and slim figure standing next to Bai Yao. Ghost Li was startled, at first thought it was Yu-Ji but after he got over his initial shock, Yu-Ji had always dressed in black, this was not her. And as expected, when that lady heard the stone door moving and turned around, her face was not covered with veil. It was Xiao Bai. Ghost Li was surprised. Ever since the great shaman's soul return lure failed and he left Majestic Fox Mountain broken-hearted and once again returned, he had not seen Xiao Bai again. Although he could tell that Ghost King and Xiao Bai were old acquaintances but he did not feel it was necessary to inquire. Xiao Bai saw Ghost Li, her expression also revealed a slight surprise and then a faint smile, said, "It is you." Ghost Li, after all knew Xiao Bai for some time and Xiao Bai had also advised him on saving Biao's matter. His heart was still somewhat grateful, nodded his head, said, "Hello." At this time Xiao Wei, who was crouching on Ghost Li's shoulders, also excitedly called out "Gigi" twice to Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai smiled to Xiao Wei and then looked at the Ghost Li, said, "You are here to see Bai Yao." Ghost Li slowly walked up. Bai Yao's beautiful and quiet face again appeared in front of him. His voice gradually turned deep and low, said, "Yes." Xiao Bai quietly watched this man, sat down beside Bai Yao, then looked at the body lying on the cold stone platform, motionless. She gently sighed, shook her head and quietly retreated out. In the stone chamber, only Ghost Li was left with Bai Yao. After an unknown amount of time passed, the heavy stone door again opened. Ghost Li slowly came out from room, looked slightly haggard. He walked a few steps then suddenly stopped. In the tunnel not far from the stone chamber, the nine-tailed celestial fox-white figure was still patiently standing there. Xiao Bai saw his appearance, sighed and said, "You must be very upset at Bai Yao's state, it is really hard on you." Ghost Li shook his head, said, "I'm fine." Xiao Bai walked to his side, patted his shoulder, whispered, "Don't be discouraged, there will always be hope." Ghost Li's body shook, turned around to see her. His mouth slightly opened, but Xiao Bai saw his expression and spoke first, "Don't ask me, I also don't know what to do now." Ghost Li's face in an instant fell, silently turned around and was about to stride off when suddenly a "wank" sounded in his mind, felt the earth spinning, instantly a chill washed over his body, an icy cold energy suddenly leapt up from his energy channels. This shock was not something trivial. Right now the cold energy acting up in his body was the sinister orb evil energy which he was extremely familiar with, but in the past, especially after he had trained and improved greatly with the third volume of Tianshu True Wei, this ice-cold energy was gradually suppressed and did not misbehave. For some reasons today it suddenly burst out. In no time, under Xiao Bai's astonished stare, Ghost Li turned pale, looked as if he was enveloped in a layer of frost, and from his body, a strange black-green light emanated 3 kai out, in it mixed with a savage bloodthirsty smell. Xiao Bai's face turned pale, was about to reach out and help Ghost Li, but her hand touched that black-green light. She immediately felt a wave of the sinister orb evil power charging at her. Xiao Bai frowned and took 3 steps back, which then managed to avoid this demon power. Xiao Wei, who was at Ghost Li's shoulder, also felt something wrong, had long jumped off Ghost Li's body and landed behind Xiao Bai, with its 3 eyes wide opened, staring at its owner. Ghost Li's face showed that he was in pain. Suddenly his sleeve moved, a stream of cold air flashed past, the soul-devouring stick slipped out, but it did not land on the ground, floated before him and slowly rotated, as if using strange and cold eyes, watching this man who had possessed it for many years. The glimmering dark green light glowed continuously, the air filled with a strange atmosphere. Xiao Bai was pale, her brow wrinkled, but this evil power was emitted from his body. If she was to help Ghost Li remove this sudden evil power, but the source was actually in Ghost Li himself, how could she make the move? For a moment, Xiao Bai was at a loss. Ghost Li's face was turning paler and paler, when it seemed that he almost could not breathe. Suddenly, a warm pure yang red light shot burst from his chest, immediately reduced quite an amount of that yin cold evil power. Ghost Li moved and struggled to sit down. The golden and dark green lights on his face at the same time flashed, with the 2 great good faction True Ways urging. Inferno Mirror, pure yang fire increased in strength and gradually suppressed this cold yin energy. However, when Ghost Li had fully recovered, it was already an hour past. Right now Ghost Li, his body drenched, when he opened his eyes, what he saw was Xiao Bai's concerned eyes. Ghost Li gave a bitter laugh but did not say anything, slowly stood up. Xiao Bai looked at him, quietly said, "Was it the sinister orb?" Ghost Li picked up the soul-devouring stick which had at some time fell on the ground, looked at it deeply and then once again, kept it in his sleeve. Xiao Bai's eyes twitched, suddenly stepped forward, said, "Don't think that if you keep quiet nobody will know, now that sinister orb's savage evil power has already started to repel onto yourself. These 10 years the blood and energy channels in your body, because of the long-term contact with this savage thing, has turned cold and poisoned with savageness. Now that you can luckily avoided a death, it is because you were lucky to get one of the rare few magical weapons that can resist this savage object." But, she looked slightly melancholy, even her voice turned sorrowful. "But, how many times are you confident to escape? The next time, can you escape it?" Ghost Li had been standing there. There was also no expression on his gaunt face, quietly listening to Xiao Bai. After a long while, he softly said, "I am not confident, but, what can I do?" Xiao Bai bit her lips, angrily said, "Don't play the fool with me, how would you not know? Now you only need to discard this evil object immediately and then take the Inferno Mirror to a place of pure yang. With the earth fire stimulate Inferno Mirror pure yang into your body, this is the only way for you to survive." Ghost Li looked at Xiao Bai for a while, suddenly laughed. That laugh seemed inconceivably innocent, as if in the distant 10 years ago, that simple young man. Then, he slowly turned around, using the wall to support himself and walked away. Xiao Wei immediately ran to its master, scurried up to his shoulder in a few movements. Xiao Bai stared blankly at that determined yet fragile back, suddenly loudly shouted, "You wanted to die, right? In your heart you just simply want to die, right?" Ghost Li's body paused but did not look back, did not speak. A moment later, he continued to move forward. Xiao Bai's voice came loudly behind him, "You want to die, dream on. How many debts that you are still owing to people have not paid off and you want to just die off like that? Impossible. You don't want to listen to me, right? Good, you are great, then I will go myself. I will find 8 Immortal Inferno formation, incantation, let you save yourself. You remember this, Bai Yao is still lying in the cold stone chamber. Before she wakes up, even if you want to die, it is also not up to you. It is not up to you, not up to you, not up to you." In the long quiet tunnel, the echoes faintly reverberated. Ghost Li with his face bleak, his body slowly straightened, but in the end he still never turned back to look. XXX. Lush forests, quiet valley. Dawn in the venomous serpent valley was actually tranquil, but at this moment, the earth slowly shook, the smell of blood turning stronger. The countless snakes that had gathered at the border of the valley suddenly disappeared, as if somehow they sensed something. Those reptiles all went into hiding. A black smoke appeared a distance from the valley, swiftly approached. A thick and suffocating smell came forth from the sky. The gathering loud roar turned into a great crushing deafening roar. Nearer and nearer. Hoo-ah-ah-ah-ah. It was innumerable monsters, like vicious ghost and ferocious spirits charging out from the 9 netherworlds, blood-red eyes, sharp fangs, sharp cries, assaulting face on. Various kinds of strange monsters formed a surging stream of unstoppable force. In front of this turbulent wave, there was no one that could stop it and survive. Even the forests on the sides of the road, in the thunderous roars, was rapidly swallowed by the flood. There was no hesitation, no pause. This flood directly dashed into the venomous serpent valley, like a black tide instantly pouring into the green sea. In every corners of the forest, horrified snakes were thrown out unceasingly, desperately struggling in the torrent, but all without exception instantly drowned. Even that poisonous colorful miasma could not stop this terrible flood of demon beasts. The first several monsters at the front fell dead to the ground, but even more trampled on their comrades. Bodies and charged past. The powerful hurricane in an instant scattered the miasma, dispersing above the forest. Within the black torrent of evil beasts, there were 4 or 5 sturdy beasts that looked several times bigger than the average monsters, brandishing their claws and fangs, leading their men ahead. And at the entrance to the valley, there were still countless of monsters charging endlessly into the valley. The entire valley seemed to be quaking. It looked like the world's apocalypse. At the other end of the venomous serpent valley, standing at a vantage point, Ghost King took a deep breath. Although he had seen the evil beast's might, but the sight before him still made him turn pale. He composed himself. After pondering for a moment, he again looked to the forest to the north of the valley. Under the morning sun, the forest indistinctly reflected light. A hint of sneer slowly surfaced on Ghost King's lips. "One day, all of you will know, in the end, who will be the winner." He shouted in his heart like that. The expression on his face slowly hardened. Bai Yao is no longer around, then, let the world make up for it. He slowly turned around. Behind him in the dense forest, was Ghost King disciples. They packed the forest, their fighting morale high. Ghost King watched the people in front of him, countless eyes staring in his face. At that moment, who would know his feelings? Slowly raising his arm, it seemed to turn leaden. Distant cries of roars and the gradual cries of fear and shock also seemed to have traveled here. Ghost King's face suddenly changed, then, he swung his arm heavily down. His arm like knife, like a sharp sword slicing the world, cutting off the last warmth, tearing apart the dreams that once existed. That sound made by the arm in the wind, like bones fracturing from a stab in the chest. Countless people, behind his majestic back, made war cry sounds, lifting their sharp swords in their hands and charged down, their clothes flying up. A strong breeze blew, the trees swayed in the forest, like it was dancing for this. Ghost King stood among the crowd, like a hard cold rock unmoving. He turned and looked at the forest in the north. There was also movement in the forest there, gradually spreading. Ghost King laughed. He suddenly laughed crazily in the sea of people who were going to meet their deaths. That laughter was so piercing, but no one dared to ask him. Only the morning sun, with its faint warmth, still continued to leap towards this crazy mortal world. XXX. 7 days later, entrusted by Reverend Dao Zan, Pu Hong Master and Yun Yilan and the other good faction leaders, a group of good faction disciples set off from Qingyun Hill, reached southwest. Due to the gravity of the matter, the three factions had sent their most talented disciples. As if coincidence, these people had already met. Qingyun sect Xiao Yi Kai, Lin Jingyu and Lu Shuiqi, Tianyin Temple Fa Shang and Fashion, Fenshang Valley Li Xuan and Yan Hong, a total of 7 people. After setting off from Qingyun Hill, they were cautious on their way, traveling by night, trying to avoid encountering the demon beasts on the road, going at full speed to southwest, hoping to find out the reason behind for the sudden change of direction of these large number of beasts to this place. Just when these good faction disciples had just set off, although they were clearly aware of the great danger, but for the common people, no one had any intention of retreating. However, on the 7th day after they had set off, all of their faces had turned pale and did not speak for days, including the most eloquent Xiao Yi Kai, the calm and stable Fa Shang, and even Li Xuan, who had wanted to speak to Lu Shuiqi, all turned silent. Thousands of miles further into the south, the situation became more tragic. If it was not the entire village, entire city of corpses everywhere, dense white bones, it was one after another deserted village and city, fertile lands turned into scorched earth. Nobody knew, how did these demon beasts know how to set fire? Why were they so savage and bloodthirsty? Like nobody knew, when would this catastrophe end? The indistinct faint ghost wails, like it would always, reverberated in the wilderness of the southern vast lands, describing the desolate and miserable past. After entering the southwest province, they were even more cautious, but right now they faced an even bigger problem. First of all, they simply could not find any local residents. All the people either fled to the north or died tragically in this catastrophe, so, these good faction disciples were unable to find the locals and ask them about the demonic beast movements. On the other hand, most of those beast demons were unable to communicate with humans, even if they were to risk it and capture a few monsters, but the monsters would most likely only struggle and roar. How would they get information from them? They had no alternative, and after discussion, they could only follow Xiao Yikai's proposal and secretly follow the demons. Wherever there are bigger groups of demons gathering, they would head there, to see what exactly these demons are planning to do. So they tracked in the southwest for 3 days and 3 nights, during which several times they were almost discovered by monsters who had sharp hearing and sense of smell. Fortunately, Xiao Yikai, Fa Shang, Fashion, Lin Jingyu etc. were all extremely smart people, and each time they managed to escape within a hair's breadth at critical moments. But nevertheless, they still did not found out anything. Just when they were beginning to lose heart, by accident they actually found one evil sect disciple who had gone crazy in one of the forest. After they had asked in detail, or it could be said under their patient coaxing, gradually they learned that the large number of demons entering into southwest was to have a huge battle against the evil sect, and the results, of course, the evil beasts won. The once arrogant evil sect 3 branches were almost wiped out in this battle. The news immediately made everyone shocked and stunned, and in the crowd, standing the furthest, Lu Shuiqi's face had turned especially pale. Looking at pitiful person who had shrank into a ball and constantly mumbling, "Monster, monster," at times suddenly shivering from head to toe, shrieking, the 7 good faction people felt their hearts were shrouded by a layer of heavy shadow. Xiao Yikai coughed, looked at Fa Shang, said, "Fa Shang, senior brother, now that we are generally clear about the situation, what do you think we should do?" Fa Shang frowned, looked down at the pitiful person on the ground, sighed and said, "Amitabha Buddha, it is a sin, a sin." Pausing for a while, Fa Shang slowly said, "Everyone, actually the purpose of our trip, the gist of the situation we now know. Lowly monk, me think that we should first return and report about this situation to the various elders." "No." Suddenly, a cold voice was heard from beside. Everyone was startled. The person speaking was actually the quietest one on the trip, Lu Shuiqi. Fa Shang, feeling surprised, said, "Lu junior sister, if you have any other views, please speak." Lu Shuiqi, still looking pale but her voice was very calm, lightly said, "What we know now, came from this crazed evil sect disciple, and his words were incoherent and we made many speculations on our own. If we assumed we have finished our mission just based on this, I think it is not appropriate." Fa Shang was silent, everyone looked at each other. After a moment, Fa Shang nodded and said, "That's right, Lu junior sister is right, lowly monk me was too anxious just now." Xiao Yikai pondered a moment, said, "There is some truth in what Lu junior sister said, but these few days we have been checking day and night in the southwest and there was not a slightest clue. Don't tell me we have to continue searching like this." Lu Shuiqi's mouth moved but did not speak, apparently facing the 2 difficult obstacles before them. She too could not think of any good solution. But at this moment, Li Xuan, who was frequently taking glances at Lu Shuiqi, suddenly stepped forward and said, "I have an idea, maybe it has some hope." Everyone was surprised. Even Lu Shuiqi took a few more glances at Li Xuan. Fa Shang delightfully said, "Really, Li senior brother, please say." Li Xuan inhaled deeply, forced himself not to look at Lu Shuiqi, said, "I have listened carefully to the madman's words, heard him mentioned one place several times, called Venomous Serpent Valley, not sure if anyone notices." Xiao Yikai nodded his head and said, "Yes, I have also noticed. I have heard of this Venomous Serpent Valley before. It is said to be a valley deep inside the southwest mountains here. Numerous poisonous snakes resides in it. There is also highly toxic miasma in the forest and is fatal to human. No one has dared to enter this forest. As time passes, no one knows the specific location of the valley." Lin Jingyu suddenly said, "Does Li's senior brother thinks that this battle could be taking place at the legendary Venomous Serpent Valley?" Li Xuan nodded, determinedly said, "Yes, I infer that the battle would happen at this valley, and more than that, I think maybe this valley might be one of the 3 evil sect branches' headquarters. As long as we can find it, naturally we will know if the words of this crazy person are true." Yan Hong, who has been keeping silent, suddenly said, "But senior brother, it has already been so many days, let's not say whether can we find this Venomous Serpent Valley. Even if we found it, the scene over there might have changed from the original." Li Xuan coldly said, "Junior sister, don't tell me you have forgotten. Those cruel demon beasts indeed know how to eat humans and set fire, but after the fire, there would be ruins. The demons eat humans but they do not eat bones." Everyone's expressions changed. Yan Hong turned even more pale after listening to him, suddenly felt nausea. Clearly what they had saw on their way was enough to make this lady reach her psychological limit. Li Xuan sighed and did not speak anymore. Fa Shang and Fashion both quietly chanted. Xiao Yikai shook his head and walked over to Yan Hong's side, quietly comforted her with a few words, until Yan Hong slowly settled down. He then turned and walked to that shivering evil sect disciple, crouched down. "Do you know where is the Venomous Serpent Valley?" Xiao Yikai tried to make his voice as soft as possible and sounded peaceful, but that evil sect disciple's body shook, buried his head lower, did not speak. Xiao Yikai asked 3 more times, but the evil sect disciple seemed to turn deaf and did not have any reaction. Xiao Yikai slowly stood up, looked at the group, no one spoke. Xiao Yikai only sighed and said, "How?" Li Xuan, who was standing by the side, frowned, suddenly walked to the evil disciple and pulled him up, loudly asked, "Where is the place where those monsters are killing people?" The evil disciple's body shook greatly, his face immediately changed into fear, opened his mouth and made a shrill scream, but Li Xuan, like his heart was stone, held him tightly, loudly shouted, "Where is the place where those monsters are killing people?" Ah! Deeply entrenched in fear, that evil sect disciple was trembling, his teeth chattering, eyes filled with fear, but his head involuntarily looked to the north. Li Xuan's eyes froze, urgently said, "It's in the north, is it?" The evil sect disciple's head suddenly tilted, his entire body slackened, everyone was shocked and quickly went up to check. His pupil had dilated, a check on his nostrils, he had stopped breathing, he had died. Li Xuan slowly put down the body of the man, stood up, faced the north, everyone looked towards where he was looking at. In the sea of forests, under the bright clear day, there seemed to be a blood-colored cloud, shrouding above it. Chapter 153 Purgatory. Majestic Fox Mountain, where the evil sect Ghost King sect headquarters was located, shrouded in a somber, the original mighty great branch, more than half of its men were dead in a sudden, no matter to whichever mighty sect under the sky, it would also be a heavy blow. So many valiant disciples, high in battle morale however returning, was only Ghost King alone bathed in blood. The lingering shadows, on every person in Majestic Fox Mountain, their hearts and faces, nobody knew, the cruel and ferocious demon beast's next victim, who would it be? After Ghost King returned, he went straight to closed-door seclusion, nobody dared to ask him, but the people did not have to wait for a long time. Soon, the news came one after another, things also gradually cleared up. In this Southwest War, the evil sect 3 factions with their combined unprecedented force against the demon beasts. As to why would the 3 factions collaborate, or was there another scheme, other than Ghost King, most probably nobody else knew. The result of this battle, could said to be the most painful failure of the evil sect since 1,000 years, not to mention Ghost King sect losing more than half of its men. Wandu clan first suffered greatly from its internal strife, followed by the attack of the demon beasts in Venomous Serpent Valley. The remaining elite disciples almost were dead or injured. As for the seclusive Heihuan sect, for some reason this time, also led its entire sect force in this battle, and their fate too, before the endless army of beasts, a total defeat. At this moment, the defeated Ghost King sect was in a state of panic, but no matter what, their situation at the moment was still far better than Wandu clan and Heihuan sect. Most of the Ghost King sect's elites were left at Majestic Fox Mountain, therefore the main core strength was not affected, and Wandu clan and Heihuan sect after this battle, whether did anyone make it out was also uncertain. This day, after recovering for many days, while the sect disciples were speculating uneasily, Ghost King reappeared before his disciples. As for that big defeat, Ghost King did not even mention it and instead immediately issued a number of commands. Very soon, the entire Majestic Fox Mountain began to stir. Everyone started to pack for traveling, packing up things, preparing dry provisions and water, because the last instruction in the list of commands by Ghost King clearly stated one thing: due to the Central Plains demon beast turmoil and the Holy Sect's severe defeat, for the future of the Holy Sect, he had decided, the entire Ghost King sect would move together to northwest, to the Wildlands, to that legendary Holy Sect birthplace, Wildlands Holy Temple. In the hectic scene, Ghost King expressionlessly clasped his hands behind, walked towards that ice-cold stone chamber deep inside the mountain. The upcoming road trip was thousands of miles, and the Wildlands was desolate, hot and dry. With Biao's current condition, she was not suitable for the long distance to the Wildlands. Initially Ghost King intended to request Xiao Bai to look after Bai Yao, with the nine-tailed celestial fox's 1,000 years of skills, including the defensive traps in the mountain. It would be absolutely safe, but now that things had changed. Ever since he came back, for some reason, Xiao Bai had disappeared. He asked several people but nobody knew where she had gone. Thinking of this, Ghost King's brows slightly wrinkled. Unknowingly he discovered he had arrived at the stone chamber where his daughter was lying. He sighed, opened the door and went inside. Ghost Li was standing there, quietly accompanying Bai Yao. He heard movements behind him but he did not even glance back. Ghost King slowly paced, walked to Ghost Li. Standing beside him he looked towards his daughter who was quietly lying on the ice stone platform. That pale and beautiful face, as delicate and beautiful as before, as if in the other world she knew too. In the world the two men who were most concerned about her, whom were also as important as to her, were by her side. Her face was very quiet, very calm, very at ease. Ghost King watched Bai Yao for a long while, a faint glint in his eyes, a rare tender. After a long time, he let out a long sigh, lightly said, "Why are you not packing up your things?" Ghost Li did not lift his head up, and did not directly answer him, instead asked Ghost King, "I heard in the vicinity of the Wildlands, it is either the bleak Gobi Desert or the vast expanse of the desert, exceptionally hot all year round, is it?" Ghost King nodded his head and said, "Yes, when I once visited the Wildlands Holy Temple, the climate is indeed the case." Ghost Li frowned, said, "Then how can Bai Yao go? Now that she in this condition, how can she take the suffering?" Ghost King glanced at Ghost Li, said, "I never intended to bring Bai Yao to Wildlands." Ghost Li's expression changed, looked over at Ghost King. Ghost King said, "The Wildlands is desolate, dry and hot. It is indeed not suitable for Yaoer. I intended to let her stay in Majestic Fox Mountain. After we leave, activate the mountain's defensive traps and gears, close up the entrance, as such it is very safe. But in any case, there has to be someone to come in at least once a month to check, so as to prevent any accidents." Ghost Li stood up and said, "Leaving one person, who is it?" Ghost King lightly said, "I wanted to entrust to Xiao Bai. Her cultivation is high and is very willing to take a few years of good rest in this Majestic Fox Mountain, but for some reason, I could not find her these few days." Ghost Li's expression slightly changed. Ghost King noticed it, said, "Why, you know where she is gone." Ghost Li slowly shook his head, was silent for a moment, said, "Let me stay here to take care of Bai Yao." Ghost King gazed intently at him, said, "I am certainly assured if you take care of Bai Yao, and I also trust you, but now that the Holy Sect is heavily wounded, I intend to revitalize our prestige. Firstly we have to stabilize the people, unify the Holy Church, need someone with talents like you around." Ghost Li's eyes for the first time left Bai Yao, slowly shifted to Ghost King, suddenly said, "This time the war with the demon beast, those disciples that followed you are all dead." Ghost King's expression changed, the glint in his eyes flared. This was the first time someone had dared to mention this matter to him, but he was not angry, only looked deeply at Ghost Li and then slowly said, "All are dead." Ghost Li looked away, back to Bai Yao again, after a long while, said, after this big battle, although the evil sect is seriously weakened but Wandu clan and Heihuan sect are also completely defeated, to our Ghost King sect whose strength still remains, it cannot be denied that it is a good opportunity to unify the evil sect. With the current situation as such, even without me, there is no longer any power that can compete with you. He quietly said, but over at Bai Yao, still needs someone to look after, just let me stay to take care of her. Ghost King looked at him for a moment, nodded and said, since you say so, I will not force you. I will entrust Yaoer to you. I believe you will be able to take good care of her, but remember this, the demon beast's strength is terrible and their senses sharp. Just in case, it is best to seal the mountain entrance and you can probably come and check every 1 or 2 months, as such there won't be any mishaps. Ghost Li slowly nodded, considered he had agreed. Ghost King looked at his daughter again, a moment later, he uttered a sigh, turned and walked out. When he was about to reach the door, suddenly Ghost Li's voice was heard from behind him, sect head. Ghost King was stunned, felt somehow unexpected. Ghost Li rarely took the initiative to speak out, this time he suddenly spoke, puzzled what it was for, immediately said, what? Ghost Li was silent for a moment, suddenly said, do you hate me? Ghost King back facing him, did not move, did not speak, and could not see his expression. Ghost Li slowly said, Bai Yao is like this because of me, in your heart, is it that you hate me a lot? His face was indifferent, as if he was talking about a topic that had nothing to do with him, but Ghost King still did not speak. In the stone chamber, the two men with their backs facing each other, the tension in the air seemed to thicken. The light mist, gently drifted up from the ice-cold stone platform underneath Bai Yao's body, floated in the air, for an unknown length of time. Suddenly the stone door was heard opening. Ghost King did not say anything, quietly went out. Rumble, the heavy deep sound, the stone door once again shut, leaving only Ghost Li beside Bai Yao. His expression was wooden, staring blankly at the woman in front of him. XXX. In the ancient and dense primitive forests, along with the wind came a horrible and burnt smell, like an ugly scar. Everywhere in the original exuberant forests it carried the signs of destructions from the demon beast's rampage. Huge trees lying on the ground in disorder, numerous forest animals' corpses littered everywhere, the entire forest's tranquility had vanished. On the second day after they discovered the crazy evil sect disciple, Xiao Yi Kai, Fa Shang etc., the entourage of 7 good faction disciples, following along the gradually turning obvious demon beast's trail, approaching the valley hidden deep in the mountains. The forests that they passed by on their way, replicated that scene, although human bones were not seen, but they were still disturbed by the scene. In many of their minds, even coincidentally at the same time, reflected, do those demon beasts really come to this world just to kill? This day at noon, the group of them appeared on that decrepit ancient path outside Venomous Serpent Valley. The area here showed such clear signs of the monsters' destructions that they almost did not have to spend any effort to investigate. That path was widened from the stampede made by the demon beasts. Giant footprints and sharp claw marks were everywhere. The air still carried a foul smell. Other than that, there seemed to be a faint unbearable stench, but nobody could tell what it was. Looking at the valley entrance, inside and outside were similarly in a mess. The forest and ground which was ravaged by that terrible flood was clearly visible. The ancient path meandered and twisted. Who would know in that valley what is exactly there? For some reason, all of them looked a little nervous, caught in an awkward silence. In the end, Xiao Yi Kai coughed once but then discovered that his own throat was dry and painful. He composed himself, said, everyone, it seems that the evil sect disciples did not speak a lie. It should be here. A big battle happened between the demon beasts and the evil sect. He looked around, hesitated for a moment, then asked, shall we go in and see? No one spoke. Even Li Xuan's face looked pale. A moment later, Fa Shang, who stood beside Xiao Yi Kai, quietly chanted, said, since we are here, we should no longer say to give up, let's go in. Actually everyone there knew that, just that for some reason, there seemed to be something strange in the valley, stealthy, affecting everyone's moods, striking fear in their hearts. Fashion, who had always following his senior brother Fa Shang, with a low, muffled voice acknowledged and walked over to his senior brother. Let's go. The one who said this was not Xiao Yi Kai but Lin Jingyu. His hand tightened over the Dragon Slayer sword and then his face solemn, took the lead into the valley. Following behind him was Lu Shuiqi. Li Xuan too immediately kept up. Xiao Yi Kai and Fa Shang looked at each other, saw the worry in each other's eyes, but a moment later, everyone still went in. The vast valley, the boundless forest, the group walked along in the valley, surrounded by only a dead silence, not to mention animals, even the usual cries of birds were missing. The valley seemed to have become a lifeless evil spirit. The foul smell of the beasts was as strong, but as they went deeper, everyone started to frown tightly. Right now, following the mountain breeze, the other stench made one feel nauseous and turning thicker. The mountain road twisted and turned, the crowd was on high alert against their surroundings, slowly moving forward. In a corner ahead of them, there was a call. When they arrived here, the stench in the air had reached an unbearable stage. Suddenly, Yan Hong, who was in the middle, suddenly dashed to the roadside. Everyone was startled. Li Xuan exclaimed, "Junior sister, what happened to you?" He stopped halfway, because he and everyone saw Yan Hong standing on the weeds beside the path, vomiting hard. No one laughed, because nobody knew how long they could hold on, although the valley still had not revealed its true colors, but it seemed to be more terrible than most places on earth. Yan Hong panted and stopped, looking pale, walked back to everyone and whispered, "Sorry, I really." Fa Shang forced a smile, said, "Yan junior sister, it doesn't matter." Xiao Yikai also said, "That's right, nobody can stand the smell too, you don't have to mind. If you don't feel up to it, why don't you first go out of the valley and wait for us?" Yan Hong hesitated a moment but shook her head and said, "Let us go." Li Xuan walked over, faced Yan Hong and nodded his head, a comforting look in his eyes, quietly said, "Take care of yourself, don't force yourself." Yan Hong nodded and promised. Xiao Yikai turned and said, "All right, let's continue on. We don't know what monster or danger lies ahead, everyone must be careful." All of them nodded and once again went forward. Lin Jingyu was still at the lead, approaching nearer to that call. He held the Dragon Slayer's sword in his hand, his palms started to sweat. By now the air was so thick with the stench smell that it was hard to breathe. Lin Jingyu's face turned slightly pale, clenched his teeth, strided across, passed around the corner of the call and saw the scene in the valley. His whole body instantly turned stiff. The group behind him immediately noticed his abnormal reaction and could not help but became nervous. Xiao Yikai quietly called Lin Jingyu twice but he did not respond at all, only staring ahead. Lu Shuiqi was the second person to walk over, then Li Xuan, Yan Hong, Xiao Yikai, Fa Shang and Fashion. One by one they passed through the call, saw the scene in the venomous Serpent Valley. Then, every one of them was stunned. That would probably be the legendary Asura Hell. Such a terrible scene appeared under the clear and bright blue sky. Countless bodies inside and outside that residence inside the valley. There were humans, also various demon beasts and monsters. Some were complete but many more were limbs and miserable bodies, torn apart until it was unrecognizable, densely packed everywhere, almost to a point where gaps could not be seen. After composing himself with an effort and walking further into the valley, the scene became more tragic. Without even imagining, they could tell the battle was extremely tragic. Innumerable bodies and demon beasts' bodies entangled together. The land under their feet had all turned completely deep black. That was the color after being dyed with blood. Walking into that residence, inside and outside every room, entrances to critical tunnels, they could see the remnants of the tragic battle. In some places corpses piled high up, apparently to fight over this small entrance. The two parties advanced waves after waves, desperately fought, stepping over their comrades' bodies and wrestling tirelessly. In the courtyard, the group began to see a few demon beasts' bodies which were huge in size, some even bigger than the residents, but these once savage and ferocious beasts could only now lie quietly in this mortal hell, waiting to rot. The stink of the corpses in the air had reached a terrible degree, but the good faction disciples instead seemed better than before, because the tragic scene before them made them more indifferent to this stench. Just that, no one looked fine, no matter who it was. These people's countenance looked almost the same as the dead. They continued deeper into the residence, more bodies appeared before them, and now nobody knew just how many evil sect disciples and demon beasts died in this valley. They walked almost subconsciously in, walked. Every one of their faces were wooden, every one firmly held their own magical weapons, refused to relax even a little. After passing innumerable bodies, they came to a mourning hall. The reason they could tell it was a mourning hall because they saw a coffin in this room, and in this room, the battle seemed to be the most intense here. Describing it as the bodies piling as high as a mountain did not seem exaggerating. It was also here, the group discovered many of the familiar evil sect bodies. Bai Duji, blood-sucking vampire, Elder Duanmu. These once all-powerful, invincible evil sect people, at the moment died with grievances hiding in this place. Many of them still had fear on their faces. Anyone could imagine, but nobody wished to, what kind of scene they witnessed before they died. As their investigation deepened, Xiao Yikai and the other slightly older ones in succession found even more famous evil sect figures, including God of Poison 3 disciples, many important figures from Heihuan sect. However, for Ghost King sect, although most of the dead disciples were wearing Ghost King sect uniforms, but very little of the well-known figures were found. Everyone slowly gathered to the front of the hall, saw each other's countenances. Xiao Yi Kai hoarsely said, "A lot of people died here, the important figures of evil sect are all here, seems like all of Wan Du clan are dead." Yan Hong, who was beside, was deathly pale, said quietly, "It is the same over there, many were dead from Heihuan sect, even San Miao madam is too there." Lu Shuiqi's face was pale, her teeth clenched tightly together, her expression complicated. She looked like she could not bear, looked disgusted too, and for some reason, fearful. As the last person to join the group, she suddenly said, "Saw any of the Ghost King sect people?" Everyone shook their heads together and then was startled slightly. Li Xuan, who was standing beside, looked even more terrible. Xiao Yi Kai glanced at him, spoke to Lu Shuiqi, "Many of the dead are Ghost King ordinary disciples, but seems like did not see well-known figures' bodies." Lu Shuiqi's expression relaxed slightly, but Li Xuan's eyes suddenly glimmered, coldly said, "Xiao senior brother, have you forgotten that these beasts devour humans? On the way in, we saw many white bones, who knows those Ghost King sect evildoers would they have been?" Wah! A cry interrupted Li Xuan's words, but it was Yan Hong who could not bear it, ran to a corner and vomited again. Li Xuan was startled for a moment, then sighed and stopped talking. Fa Shang looked like he could not bear to, with fashion together chanted quietly. All of them knew, although Li Xuan's words were harsh, but the possibility was high. Xiao Yi Kai, Lin Jingyu and the rest had complicated expressions, slowly looked down. Only Lu Shuiqi's face was bleak, her pale face without a trace of color, even her body trembled involuntarily. But this delicate and cold woman did not look down, she slowly looked up to the sky. In that limitless clear sky, even the clouds above the valley looked blood red. Lu Shuiqi's lips moved, looked as if she wanted to shout out something, but, eventually not a sound. Chapter 154 Unfilial. Qing Yunhil Tong Tian Peak, Crystal Hall. What? With an incredulous cry, Reverend Dao Zan exclaimed, "The three main evil sect branches after the battle with the demon beasts, the entire force annihilated." Standing below, three people who were the current good faction leaders and with many seniors standing or sitting beside. Xiao Yi Kai, Fa Shang, Lu Shuiqi and the rest of the good faction disciples who had returned to Qing Yunhil did not speak, only the lead Xiao Yi Kai affirmatively nodded. Said, "Yes, teacher, the seven of us witnessed it ourselves. In the southwest venomous Serpent Valley corpses lay everywhere, too horrible to look at. The evil sect indeed suffered a heavy blow, including San Miao madam and etc. Heihuan sect, Wan Du clan, many of the public figures. We have already found their corpses, only the main figures from Ghost King sect were not found, but perhaps because of the fact that the demon beasts devour humans so." Lu Shuiqi, who was standing behind, turned pale again, as if this matter and that tragic scene had been constantly on her mind, impossible to get rid of. However, in any case, right now she was able to control her own emotions and her face did not give much away. Others did not seem to notice anything, only Shui Yu Master, who was sitting in front of the crowd, this person who had brought up Lu Shuiqi, noticed that the ice frost indifferent face of Lu Shuiqi seemed to show some distress. Shui Yu Master's brow wrinkled slightly, gently sighed, did not speak. At the moment the crowd in Crystal Hall was in a commotion. Their voices getting louder and louder, looking at the faces of these good faction elites, some were surprised, some fear and many more had mixed expressions, delight and shock. Come to think of it, it is also true, the evil sect and good faction had been foes for unknown number of years. The good faction's several attempts to exterminate them were unsuccessful. Unexpectedly this time they were wiped out by the demon beasts in one fell swoop. It was really a pleasant surprise. But since the evil sect was able to hold their own against the good faction, their forces naturally could not be underestimated, but they had such a tragic fate against the demon beasts. Those seated were not fools. Anyone could also infer, the next target of the demon beasts must be Qing Yunhil, where the world's good faction convened. And now the world's last hope, the good faction, would they be able to block this unprecedented catastrophe? Nobody's heart knew the answer. The three giant pillars of good faction who were sitting at the forefront, Reverend Dao Zan, Pu Hong Master and Yun Yilan, after quietly discussing for a period, all were frowning. Then Reverend Dao Zan spoke some words. Pu Hong Master and Yun Yilan nodded their heads, indicating their agreement. Following which Reverend Dao Zan stood up, coughed once. The private discussions in Crystal Hall immediately toned down. Everyone looked towards Reverend Dao Zan. Reverend Dao Xuan's face was solemn, until the crowd completely quietened down. In a heavy voice said, "Various fellow friends, everyone has heard the incident clearly just now. The evil sect has unexpectedly fall. It is completely out of our expectations, but as for the details, whether there is still any evildoers who made it out of that battle, we still have to investigate thoroughly. However, right now that matter is not important anymore. His face grim, eyes glinting, not of anger but of power, solemnly said, "Various fellow cultivators, now that the catastrophe is right in front of us, the common people in misery, the demon beasts evildoers, might, is really unsettling. But we as the good faction people, there is no reason for us to retreat anymore. This matter is complicated. I and Pu Hong Master and Yun Valley Master wish to have a good discussion and then decide. Everyone also please go back first. Take a good rest, the great battle most likely is near, at that time, for the common people, depends on everyone to give their best." The crowd nodded and answered. Reverend Dao Shuang revealed a trace of a smile. Pu Hong Master and Yun Yilan also stood up, walked to the rear rooms. Reverend Dao Zan was about to follow along when suddenly he thought of something, spoke to Xiao Yi Kai, "You two come along, tell us again in detail about the situation." Xiao Yi Kai acknowledged, strutted up, followed behind Reverend Dao Zan into the rear quarters. In the hall after these three revered elders left, immediately became bustling with noise and excitement. The crowd formed small groups, discussing spiritedly. Other than Xiao Yi Kai who had followed Reverend Dao Zan in, the other 6 disciples who had went to the southwest, were all crowded around, the people speaking at the same time, enquiring about the details, at times exclaimed out, shook their heads, sighed etc. various different kinds of expressions and sounds. And in the crowd, Lu Shuiqi had remained silent, her eyes indifferent, but she seemed not to see those faces in front of her, instead staring at some distant place. Suddenly a stir went through the crowd and then a path was made out. Small Bamboo Valley head Shuyu Master walked in, Wenmin and other beautiful Small Bamboo Valley female disciples followed along. Lu Shuiqi recovered her senses, saw her teacher before her and staring at herself, her lips moved, quietly called out, "Master." Then, lowered her head. Shui Yu Master's face was expressionless, said, "Sect head Reverend is discussing with the other seniors on this matter. There will not be any other matters here for the time being. You will follow me back to Small Bamboo Valley first." Lu Shuiqi nodded, whispered, "Yes." Shui Yu Master, ignoring the rest, headed first out of the crystal hall, Lu Shuiqi following. Qing Yun faction's heads, reputations were not trivial, the other good faction members mostly were very respectful of her, all made way to let out a path. Looking at Lu Shuiqi about to follow her teacher out of the hall, Li Xuan who was standing at a side had a trace of anxiety on his face, stepped one foot out and was about to say something when suddenly a silhouette blocked in front of him. Li Xuan was taken aback and upon closer look, it was Shui Yu Master's eldest disciple, Wenmin. Wenmin smiled and said, "Li's senior brother, Shuiqi Jr.'s sister must be very tired from her travel, better let her have a good rest. And this time she was away for quite some time, my teacher must have a lot to say to her." Li Xuan glanced at Wenmin a few times, a disappointed look on his face but eventually still stepped back, said, "All right, but like to request Wenmin's senior sister to please take good care of." Before Li Xuan could finish, Wenmin smiled and said, "Li's senior brother, please be assured, Shuiqi and I are same-sex sisters, we are closer than real siblings, what must be done or said, I will naturally do and say." Li Xuan's face reddened, nodded his head and no longer spoke, retreated to the side. Wenmin with a few other female disciples, also walked out of the hall. Very soon, Qing Yunhill Small Bamboo Peak group of people had already disappeared before the people's sights. XXX. Along the way they rode the clouds and mounted the mist, from Tongtian Peak back to Small Bamboo Valley. After Shui Yu Master landed, her face aloof, did not speak to anyone and walked directly to the Small Bamboo Valley Hall. The group respectfully stood at where they were, watching their teacher. Until their teacher's figure disappeared into the building, Lu Shuiqi's eyes looked lost, standing motionless at where she was, until Wenmin patted her shoulder. Wenmin's eyes carried a trace of worry, whispered, "Junior sister, what happened to you? Look at how lost you are and didn't respond even calling you a few times." Lu Shuiqi was startled for a moment, a trace of a smile forced out, said, "I'm sorry, senior sister." Wenmin shook her head, said, "Why are you saying sorry to me? We are all sisters, don't have to be so formal." "Oh right, I noticed something off with teacher's expression, I will go to take a look at her. You two had a long journey, go back first to take a good rest." Lu Shuiqi was silent for a moment, quietly said, "I'm afraid teacher is still mad at me." Wenmin looked at this most beautiful and most talented junior sister of the same faction, suddenly felt that on her pale face, although still as beautiful but looking thinner and pallid than before. Wen Min sighed in her heart, hugged Lu Shuiqi's shoulder, softly said, "Silly girl, don't think foolish thoughts, how teacher has always treated you, we and you yourself know it. It will be all right, I will go take a look now." Lu Shuiqi silently nodded. Wen Min smiled, left some instructions with the other junior sisters and was about to leave when a girl walked out from the door ahead. It was that young girl Xiaoxi on the night where Ghost Li had secretly sneaked up to Small Bamboo Valley. Because of her young age and meager cultivation, therefore she had always stayed on Small Bamboo Valley. Shuiyu Master found her intelligent and lovely and so kept her around her. Xiaoxi glanced over their direction, with quick steps walked over to Wen Min and Lu Shuiqi. Wen Min with a "I," until Xiaoxi reached them, said, "Xiaoxi, why did you come out, didn't teacher just returned? You should go wait on her." Xiaoxi nodded, glanced at Lu Shuiqi, said, "Big senior sister, various senior sisters, teacher wants me to come over and ask Shuiqi's senior sister to go to Quiet Bamboo Pavilion, to see her." Wen Min was surprised, turned back to look Lu Shuiqi. Lu Shuiqi's lips moved, a complex expression passed her eyes and then said, "All right, I will go now." After speaking, she walked straight ahead and soon disappeared into the buildings. Wen Min looked while Lu Shuiqi left, brows frowning, spoke to Xiaoxi. "Xiaoxi, did teacher say anything else, why did she ask Shuiqi to go over?" Xiaoxi shook her head, "Nope, after teacher came back, she kept to herself, after a while she told me to ask Shuiqi's senior sister to see her." Wen Min with a, "Oh," for the moment also could not deduce the reason, shook her head, spoke to the other junior sisters, "All right, it seems like there is no other matters, all of you go back first and rest." The group of women acknowledged and started to leave. Wen Min glanced towards the direction that Lu Shuiqi left, felt a heavy feeling in her heart, for a moment a mix of emotions welled in her heart. Quiet Bamboo Pavilion was located at a secluded area of the Small Bamboo Valley's buildings, near the rear of the mountain, surrounded by verdant tiers of bamboo. When the mountain breeze blew from time to time, the bamboo leaves gently shook, giving one a meditative feeling. Shuiyu Master liked to come here, staying by herself, therefore the other Small Bamboo Valley disciples were very familiar with this place. Lu Shuiqi walked past the corridor, stepped onto the path made out of smooth small stones in the bamboo forest, meandering along the way, deep into the bamboo forest, soon arrived at the fine house made from bamboo. From the outside it looked simple, the outer walls made from beads, experienced countless of storms and time, right now had a faint mark of age. On both sides of the house, the small windows were opened and indistinctly could see the meditating silhouette of Shuiyu Master. Lu Shuiqi walked to the door, at the same time using the door made out of bamboo as a cover. For some reason, she felt a little nervous and inhaled deeply once, said, "Teacher, I am Shuiqi, did you call me?" Shuiyu Master's voice was heard from the house, calm and emotionless, "Yes, come in." Lu Shuiqi bestirred herself, pushed the door and went in. The furnishings in the room were very simple, table and chairs and tea sets, a desk beside the window, paper, ink pen and ink on it. Shuiyu Master was a person who did not like luxury. Right now she was sitting before the desk, quietly watching the bamboo forest outside the window. Lu Shuiqi walked to her back, watching Shuiyu Master's back figure, quietly said, "Teacher." Shuiyu Master unhurriedly turned around and looked at Lu Shuiqi. Lu Shuiqi seemed unwilling to meet her teacher's eyes and lowered her head down. Teacher and disciple, both of them, nobody spoke. The atmosphere in the room turned somehow awkward. Actually, Shuiyu Master and Lu Shuiqi were both people not with many words. This kind of situation had also happened when they were alone together, but somehow, this time today, between the teacher and her disciple, there seemed to have another strange unfamiliar feeling, distancing each other further than before. After a while, Shuiyu Master broke the silence. Her voice calmly asked, "This time you went to the southwest, along the way was it smooth sailing?" Lu Shuiqi nodded her head and said, "It was still all right. Along the way the demon beasts were rampant, but we all tried our best to avoid them and finally found a crazed evil sect disciple, which we then found the venomous Serpent Valley, saw." Her voice suddenly stopped, a trace of visible pain flashed past her face, even her body also seemed to tremble. Shuiyu Master looked at Lu Shuiqi, her eyes glimmering, as if she was contemplating something. After a moment, she looked at Lu Shuiqi, said, "Have you seen him?" Lu Shuiqi was stunned, looked at her teacher, Shuiyu Master, although her expression was calm but she seemed to have seen through to her heart. Lu Shuiqi's expression changed, quietly said, "Teacher, what are you saying?" Shuiyu Master coldly said, "I am referring to Zhang Xiaofan, who is also the current Ghost Li in Ghost King sect." Shui Yu Master's voice was not loud, but to Lu Shuiqi, it was as if a thunder beside her ear. She abruptly lifted her head up, her face pale, but the bright stare of her teacher standing before her was still staring at her eyes. Lu Shuiqi's lips opened and closed tightly together, did not speak a word. Silence once again descended. Time passed. Shui Yu Master's expression also slowly relaxed. Her eyes, while looking at Lu Shuiqi, also gradually had pity and pained expressions. "Here, how long are you going to lie to me?" Shui Yu Master looked at Lu Shuiqi, slowly said. Lu Shuiqi's hands clenched tightly into a fist, the fair skin due to the force exerted turned white around the joints. It was clear at this moment she was also extremely agitated. Just that, looking at her mentor who had brought her up, her eyes gradually misted, but in the end she with an effort held it back, clenched her teeth. She slowly kneeled down before Shui Yu Master. "It is disciples' fault, let down teacher's teachings." Her voice became smaller and smaller, her delicate back also seemed to be gently trembling. Shui Yu Master heaved a long sigh, her eyes full of vicissitudes of life, as if from this disciple, she recalled back her past. Even her own expression also had grief. She slowly turned and walked to the window, looking out to the green bamboos, swaying in the wind. Just that person, would he still remember this place? "You can get up," Shui Yu Master faintly said. There was no movement behind her. Apparently Lu Shuiqi was still kneeling on the ground. Shui Yu Master did not insist further, said, "Here, you have been extremely bright, some things I thought even if I do not say it out, you should know." Lu Shuiqi, kneeling behind her, was motionless. Shui Yu Master continued, "You being entangled with that Zhang Xiaofan, for you, this is still an ill-fated relationship, do you know?" Lu Shuiqi quietly acknowledged, her voice almost indiscernible, said, "Yes." Shui Yu Master unhurriedly said, "Moreover, Zhang Xiaofan has already betrayed the good faction, devouring blood and turning evil. This decade his actions, I do not have to say more on this to you. To tell you the truth, between you and him, right now has become the talk of the town. Even your sect head teacher Uncle Dao Zan also knows about it. Just that those elders firstly considered you young in ignorance, secondly your aptitude, intelligence and hard gain cultivation, again gave you another chance. You must not continue to obstinately persist in the wrong way." Towards the end, Shui Yu Master's voice gradually turned urgent and harsher. Lu Shuiqi's face turned paler, but for some reason, her body stopped trembling. Shui Yu Master's face slowly softened, turned and helped Lu Shuiqi up, gently said, "Here, you are my most beloved disciple, in the branch, even among the entire 7 branches younger generation of disciples, you have the highest aptitude of cultivation Dao, your future has boundless prospect. I have very high expectation of you, you know." Lu Shuiqi whispered, "Yes, teacher." Shui Yu Master looked at her, said, "With your aptitude, in the future the leader of Small Bamboo Valley, naturally would be you. At that time you would be revered by thousands, meditating and comprehending Tao. As such, isn't it what you have dreamt of in the past?" Lu Shuiqi was silent, only bowing slightly. On her beautiful face, other than her pale complexion, was the glint in her bright eyes slowly changing. The misted eyes had already disappeared. Shui Yu Master sighed, said, "Go back and think about it carefully." Lu Shuiqi stood before her but did not immediately turn to leave, instead slowly looked up and looked at her benevolent teacher who had raised her up. "What is it here?" Shui Yu Master asked. "Teacher," Lu Shuiqi slowly called out, said, "I have let you down." Shui Yu Master shook her head and sighed, said, "What silly words are you saying?" Lu Shuiqi looked strange, a trace of agitation appeared on her usually indifferent face, even her breathing quickened. Shui Yu Master very quickly noticed that, frowned and looked at her, said, "What is it here?" Lu Shuiqi, as if turbulent waves were set off in her heart, therefore making the expressions on her face change, but finally, facing Shui Yu Master, she quietly said, "Teacher, you're right, I am really muddle-headed. Zhang Xiaofan and I knew too, this is an ill-fated impossible relationship." A trace of regret flashed past Shui Yu Master's eyes. She gently said, "Here, return to the shore. As long as you sever the emotions, there is nothing great. At least, you still have teacher in Small Bamboo Valley, and Qingyun sect which could still accept you." Lu Shuiqi abruptly looked up. The speed astonishing, on her elegant and beautiful face, was full of pain and sadness, even her voice was quivering. "Teacher, but I am unable to sever." Shui Yu Master's face changed, stared intently at Lu Shuiqi. Suddenly her hand raised and fell, "Pa!" a sound, giving Lu Shuiqi a slap heavily. Lu Shuiqi did not avoid it and did not step back, standing where she was motionless, she only bit her lips tightly, her body slowly trembling. You, what did you say? Shui Yu Master's voice seemed to be also quivering, but her words were filled with anger. You this traitorous disciple, do you know what you're talking about? Lu Shuiqi's face had long turned white with not a trace of color, but she still met the eyes of Shui Yu Master, as if determinedly said, Teacher, you have adopted me since young, raised me up and taught me, my gratitude is deep beyond. Shuiqi is unfilial, made benevolent teacher to be so angry and upset, deserved to die. Her white clothes fluttered, once again kneeled in front of her teacher, said, Shuiqi rather die and would not dare to betray benevolent teacher and good faction. If in the future I meet that Zhang Xiaofan again, disciple will do my best and take his life with Tianya sword. If unsuccessful, then disciple will just die by his hands. Shui Yu Master started to look enraged, but after hearing Lu Shuiqi's words, she then slowly calmed down, but the following words made her face change again. Lu Shuiqi kneeled in front of her, breathed deeply, her eyes looking away, at the ground before her, as if into her own heart, slowly said, but this ill-fated sinful love, disciple is unable to cut it off, no longer able to sever. The room instantly turned deathly silent, as if even their breathings also paused. A moment later, Shui Yu Master's sharp stern loud scolding was heard, resounded in this house. You this traitorous disciple, you get out, I never want to see you again. Chapter 155 Night Drinks. Majestic Fox Mountain, icy cold stone room. Ghostly quietly looked at Bai Yao lying serenely on the ice stone platform, the women in slumber within the curls of the white mist. The corner of her mouth always seemed to be smiling. At this moment, does she still have feelings? Does she know someone is beside her protecting her? Or to say, in her heart, she had never regretted, and so therefore she looked so serene while sleeping. As for these, Ghostly had asked himself numerous times. He never knew the answer and did not dare to think about it, just that every time he thought of it, he seemed to receive another degree of suffering. However, his body right now was getting worse, although because he had practiced 3 volumes of the Tianshu True Way, these few days he had came to realize that the true ways of Buddha, Taoism, evil had a way to merge together. His skills improved as the days went by, but sinister orbs evil power seemed to be circulating in his body every day, like a pestering spirit, waiting for the final moment to perish with him. That icy cold feeling, Ghostly had long been familiar with it, ever since from his youth until now, it had always accompanied him. Even if he was to die, he probably would feel the cold like that and die. He gave a wry smile, finally glanced at Bai Yao. This was the 3rd day he was guarding Bai Yao alone. You have a good rest for a while, I will come back soon to see you. Ghostly gently said, don't be afraid, your father and I are just temporarily away. Even if I were to die, I will still come back to see you before I die. He looked at Bai Yao, smiled gently and then turned and walked out of the stone room. The light white mist floated, like a veil behind him. Rumble. The heavy stone door slowly closed behind him. Xiaowei, who was long awaiting at a side, jumped up his shoulder. Ghostly's hand gently smoothed Xiaohui's head, nodded his head and then walked all the way out. Along the way he would either reach out to the wall corners or after passing through a number of turns activated the traps. The layers of mechanisms in Majestic Fox Mountain Ghost King Sect headquarters were all set, just the heavy stone doors, there were already more than 10 closing down. In the Majestic Fox Mountain right now, everywhere was the sounds of traps activating, but there was only one human silhouette, Ghostly. The others had long at 3 days ago, followed Ghost King into the Wildlands Holy Temple. The Majestic Fox Mountain right now was empty and lonely. Ghostly walked out of the mountain body. When the sun shone onto his body bringing a trace of warmth, he could not help but shivered. Rumbling, the last stone door slowly closed, covering up this huge mountain body. Within it Ghostly heard vague sounds of ka-ta, and knew that it was the sound of the trap setting in place. In the future, if somebody who do not know how to activate the mechanism, and wistfully intend to force his way in through this more than 1,000 jin rock, then he would need skills like a celestial being in order to do so. The warm sun shone onto his body. Xiaowei lying on his shoulder stretched out both of its arms, stretching itself, its mouth yawned. Ghostly turned to it, smiled slightly. Why, looking so bored and sleepy? Xiaowei Gigi called twice, its monkey face showing the whites of its eyes, then it gestured and danced, kept pointing to outside of the mountain. Ghostly smiled and said, so you are bored? Ah, oh, the surroundings here are desolate, not even a few trees, no wonder you feel uncomfortable. Xiaowei immediately nodded earnestly, jumped down from Ghostly's shoulder, Gigi calling, gesturing with his limbs. Ghostly inhaled deeply, turned to look back at Majestic Fox Mountain, which had by now already merged with the mountain as one. no visible traces of the entrance could be seen, nodded his head and said, "Well, anyway, we have to wait a month before going in to visit Bai Yao. Taking this time, let's take a walk around here." Xiao Wei rejoiced, bounced on the ground, grinning broadly. Ghost Li was infected by its mood. His mood lightened, laughed and scolded, "All right, still not coming up, if not you stay here by yourself." Xiao Hui's head shrank. Suo, a sound and again up on Ghost Li's shoulder, hee smiling. Ghost Li shook his head, a smile on his lips too, his hands moved, a familiar coldness surfaced again. Ghost Li seemed to think of something, hesitated for a moment. Xiao Wei feeling puzzled, "Gg twice." Ghost Li turned to look at it, then faintly smiled, softly said, "Life is lonely, why bother to think so much?" Xiao Hui's eyes blinked twice, apparently it did not quite understand the words. Ghost Li did not say anything more. A flip of his hand, dark green light glowed, the soul-absorbing stick appeared, carrying them a monkey and a human, straight up to the blue sky, leaving majestic Fox Mountain. XXX. The most populated place on majestic Fox Mountain was a small town 200 miles northeast, called Three Fortune Town. Three Fortune Town population was not much. But there were a few villages around and so reluctantly, it could also be considered lively. In the past, for the sake of secrecy, the Ghost King sect never bought their food and other daily necessities from Three Fortunes Town, instead they went to the farther town to buy, to prevent the good faction or the evil sect other factions from discovering where the headquarters was. But before the Ghost King sect disciples returned to their mountain, many of them would rest at Three Fortunes Town. In the past, Ghost Li also passed by Three Fortunes Town with Xiao Wei, although not many times, but Xiao Wei was extremely clever, it clearly remembered. Right now they had just left majestic Fox Mountain. Xiao Wei, waving desperately at Ghost Li's shoulder, kept pointing to the direction of Three Fortunes Town. Apparently it wanted to go to Three Fortunes Town to eat and drink. Ghost Li shook his head but did not say anything, turned and headed to the direction of Three Fortunes Town. A distance of 200 miles away, to the cultivated Taoist practitioners who could fly, it was not that far. Among the blue sky and white clouds, a flash of dark green light with an indistinct black energy streaked across the sky. Xiao Wei crouched restlessly on his shoulder, at times tilting its head, its long tail swayed to and fro, wondered was it that it was anticipating the moment of savoring the delicacies. Ghost Li, while wielding the soul-absorbing stick, gazed downwards. The area around majestic Fox Mountain needed nothing more to say, a stretch of desolate bare mountains. After leaving majestic Fox Mountain range, the terrain was relatively flat, but the wilderness, it was the same with no signs of inhabitation. Looking down, only a desolate path in the wilderness lonely extended out, wondered where it leads to. Ghost Li suddenly sighed but did not say anything, only Xiao Wei was slightly weird, took a few more glances at its master. After flying less than 1 hour in the direction of northeast, they have already reached the tip of Three Fortunes Town. From far clusters of houses could be seen. Xiao Wei was already excited, Gg calling, pointing down. Ghost Li smiled and said, "All right, we will go down." The dark green light flashed, a sharp cc sound was heard in the sky, descending from the sky, landed on the streets of Three Fortunes Town. However, once he landed, Ghost Li frowned. Xiao Wei jumped down from his shoulder, scratched its head, obviously feeling bewildered. After a moment, as if it had sensed something, its 3 eyes lit up at the same time, Gg calling, looking slightly nervous. The Three Fortunes Town in front of them looked as if it had turned into an empty town. Most of the surrounding housing were still intact, only a few spots looked damaged, but the entire town of people had completely disappeared. The deathly silence shrouded above this small town. Ghost Li snorted, comprehended in his heart. Needless to say, the place's appearance here most likely was due to the demon beast's catastrophe. The people in the town might have escaped in time to the north. If they were slower, most probably they could not avoid the fate of being food for the beasts. A proper small town and yet turned into this state. And thinking further, on the divine land right now, how many towns had this similar fate too? A wind was blowing from a distance, disturbing up some sand from the streets. In this warm day, the wind seemed to be cold. Xiao Wei seemed to be uneasy, went near Ghost Li, at the same time glancing around. Ghost Li bent over, picked up Xiao Wei, muttered, "It's nothing." Xiao Hui's eyes blinked, seemed to quieten down with Ghost Li beside. Ghost Li breathed deeply, slowly walked forward. Xiao Wei crawled to his shoulder and no longer made any noise, quietly looked around. The town, other than the sound of the wind, was silent. Ghost Li walked forward, after walked half of the street, saw the doors and windows of various households were shut tightly, but some had their doors opened, not sure if it was the demon beast who had barged in. Only that along the way, they did not see any corpse. Seemed like the commoners here had ran to the north when they heard the news. At this time, suddenly a burst of cold wind, a dangling door on the left side of the street with a pong sound dropped down, echoed in the empty street. Ghostly and Xiao Wei turned around and looked at the same time, saw behind the door, an arm fell weakly on the wooden board, unmoving, at the same time a faint smell of blood in the air. Ghostly quietly looked for that direction for a while, then turned and continued to walk forward. Xiao Wei instead kept turning back to look at that arm. In the past Ghostly had came to Three Fortunes town a few times, therefore he was quite familiar with the place. He slowly walked, was silent for a long time and then said, "I remember there is a tavern ahead, let's go there, maybe we can still find something for you to eat." Xiao Wei Gg called out twice. Footsteps sounded on the street, seemed especially loud, the cold wind blowing in gusts from behind. Very quickly, walking along the street, they came to the tavern. The sign of the tavern had fallen from the door, landing face front on the entrance, covered with a layer of dust. Ghostly glanced at this wooden board, stepped on it, leaving a footprint behind. Suddenly, Xiao Wei quietly called out, stared into the tavern. Ghostly's body suddenly stopped. After a while, a deep roar was heard from the tavern. Was it Demon Beast? This was Ghostly's first reaction, but this roar sounded slightly familiar. Roar! Xiao Wei suddenly shrieked, scurried into the tavern. Ghostly was taken aback, did not know the reason for its agitation, but Xiao Wei had always been close to him, and could be said to be his only partner. No matter how, he could not allow Xiao Wei to face the mysterious thing alone. Watching Xiao Wei soon disappearing into the tavern, Ghostly's countenance changed, his body moved, he was already chasing after it. The next moment, he was in the tavern. After he took a good look at the thing inside the tavern, he could not help but was shocked. The tavern was in a mess, pots and pans were everywhere, broken pieces piling up, the tables and chairs were also in a disarray, a few were still intact, a thick layer of dust could be seen on the tables. But in such a dilapidated pub, there was a perfect table in the middle, a pot of wine and a few glasses were placed on it. Sitting next to it was a young man dressed in bright silk clothing, and on the empty space between he and Ghostly, a monster and Xiao Wei was facing each other. Its looks ferocious and terrible, in its deep roars it had a slight trace of surprise. It was the evil beast, Teodi. It was that day in the barren hills and deep forests, that mysterious boy that Ghostly met. Teodi stretched its long neck, staring with its four huge eyes, staring at Xiao Wei, but Xiao Hui's expression was not as tense as before, instead it looked happy. Gigi called out twice, grinning, slowly walked up, wanted to touch Teodi's head. Teodi growled once, apparently unused to Xiao Hui's action. Xiao Wei paused, its three eyes blinked, went around Teodi's body twice, from the left to the right, and from the right to the left. Teodi's long neck turned, followed Xiao Hui's body, making a few growls, but it sounded not as hostile, obviously towards this three-eyed monkey. Teodi had some good feelings, just that not sure if it was because it had met a greedy guy like it, which was rare, and therefore looking at it with a different look. By then that youth also saw Ghostly, remained seated, but his expression also looked startled. Evidently he did not expect to meet Ghostly here. But his expression soon resumed, smiled and nodded to Ghostly. Ghostly was not any less surprised and had more doubts on this young man's identity. To be able to appear in this dead town's tavern, without asking, this person's origin could be deduced, extremely strange. At this time Xiao Wei had already went near Teodi, suddenly opened its mouth and laughed, stretched its hand to explore, patted a few times on Teodi's head. Teodi made a low growl, its four eyes staring at Xiao Wei, looking ferocious, but Xiao Wei looked not a bit afraid, instead was amused, patted a few more times, made a strange and a funny poo-poo sound. Teodi seemed helpless against the monkey, made a snort and lay down, no longer minding Xiao Wei. Xiao Wei seemed to like this strange monster, went near Teodi and touched here and there, extremely affection. That mysterious youth looked away from the two spiritual beasts, looked at Ghostly, smiled and said, "Seems like they really got along well." Ghostly nodded and smiled too. The young man patted the chair next to him, said, "Actually we can be considered quite fated, the heavens and earth are so huge and we actually meet here. Brother, why don't you come over here and sit, let's drink a cup and also chat a bit." Ghostly glanced at Xiao Wei and Teodi, saw that Xiao Hui's attention was all on Teodi, said, "All right," and walked slowly over but to another side and took a chair, sat at the other side of the table. That young handsome face had a faint smile, reached for a clean cup, placed before Ghostly, then filled it up with wine, smiled and said, "Brother came to this deserted town, wonder what it is for." Ghostly did not answer, looked at the young man, quietly said, "Then what are you here for?" The young man smiled and said, "I passed by here and discovered that it still has a few glasses of wine remaining, and so rested here for a moment, enjoying the wine by myself." Ghostly turned to look at Xiao Wei, said, "If I said I was also bringing this monkey to look for wine here, do you believe it?" That young man was surprised, looked at Xiao Wei, suddenly laughed out, clapped his hands, said, "Believe, why not? Come, you and I drink up. Life is lonely, it is rare that there is still a person with affinity, in the desolated secluded corner of the ends of the earth, looking for wine together." Having said that, he raised his glass to Ghostly and then drained it. Ghostly looked at him intently, slowly repeating the words, "Life is lonely, life is lonely." He suddenly laughed out, that laugh was full of vicissitudes of life, raised his glass and downed it. A fire-like taste of wine, from his throat straight to his abdomen, the wine on this desolate town, was actually this strong. The young man laughed, "How is it?" Ghostly looked up, reached over for the wine jug, filled up the 2 glasses, said, "Good wine." The young man smiled deeper, slapped the table, laughed and said, "Good, it is really a good wine." In his laughter, the young man's expression gradually looked excited, suddenly loudly recited. The past feelings, vicissitudes of life. Do you still remember, the broken-hearted person? White hair, withered lamp going to the ends of the earth. A rain of loneliness for hangover. Until the end, his voice gradually turned desolate, his face also somewhat looked lonely. After he finished, he looked down and was quiet. Ghostly quietly looked at him, downed the glass of wine before him. XXX. Night, the cold wind gradually picked up. The lonely town made woo-woo sounds, like someone quietly crying in the distant. The night was dark, black like dark waves, swallowing the great earth. The monkey fell asleep on Teoti's body, and that ferocious animal at the moment was also lazily lying on the ground. In the tavern, everywhere was dark. Ghostly and the young man sat in the darkness, no one had the intention to get up and look for the candle. Perhaps in the dark, they seemed to be more comfortable. All day long, they sat face to face like that, occasionally exchanged a few irrelevant conversations, occasionally drank a few glasses of wine, and most of the time, seemed like they brought up each other's past, remained silent, contemplating their past. In such a cold night, in the desolate corners of the ends of the earth, 2 strangers seemed like they have known each other for their whole life, indifferently getting along. Chapter 156, Former Residents. Morning, it was another new day. At the Three Fortunes town entrance, Ghostly stood face to face with that young man, Xiao Wei on his shoulder, the evil beast Teoti followed behind the young man, a bored expression on its face. The young man glanced at Ghostly, smiled and said, "What a rare opportunity for us to meet. After today, we do not know when we will see each other again, brother, do take care." Ghostly lightly said, "You too." The young man seemed to recall something, said, "Now that the world is in chaos and the situation in the north seems to be getting more tense, don't you intend to go up north to take a look at the fun?" Ghostly, slightly surprised, could not help but take another glance at the young man, saw his composed expression without any subtle meaning, pondered for a moment and said, "I'll see first." "Why, are you interested in those killings and fights too?" The young man smiled but did not answer, only cupped his hands together, said, "The roads to the ends of the world are long, the world is filled with hardships and dangers, let's meet again if we are destined to." Ghostly returned the gesture, said, "Yes." The young man laughed and turned away. Teoti made a low growl, it seemed to be informing Xiao Wei too, and then followed along. Crouching on Ghostly's shoulder, Xiao Wei seemed reluctant, called out a few times at Teoti's back figure. In a short while, that mysterious young man and Teoti's figures disappeared. Ghostly looked at the direction where they had gone, was silent for a moment and then slowly turned around, the silent Three Fortunes town before him, not a single sign of life. Xiao Wei clicked its tongue twice, grabbed that wine bag on its back and drank 2 mouthfuls. Last night from the tavern cellar, this monkey actually again found some alcohol. "Let's go, Xiao Wei," Ghostly suddenly calmly spoke. Xiao Wei GG called out twice, its monkey hand fiddling with Ghostly's hair. Ghostly gazed far into the distant, after a long time, quietly said, "Over there, was where we had once lived together, do you still remember?" The monkey did not answer, nobody knew if it understood, just that on this completely cold deserted street, a cold wind seemed to blow past. Qingyun Hill, Big Bamboo Valley. The head of Qingyun Hill Big Bamboo Valley, Tian Buyi, at the moment was alone in observed silence hall with his hands clasped behind his back, pacing back and forth. His mood was extremely foul, faint traces of anger showing on his face and with a hint of irritability. His kind and understanding wife, Suru, at the moment was not in the valley and instead had went over to Small Bamboo Valley Shui Yu Master there. As for his disciples who had always been respectful to him, saw his mood and had long avoided the place, the only disciple who could still put in a word most of the time, Song Darren the eldest disciple, at the moment also could not be seen. Tian Buyi knew the reason. Now that the world's catastrophe had arrived, nobody knew when those horrible demon beasts would attack. He is one of the leaders of Qingyun sect, naturally was troubled over it. But it was also because of this, after repeated persuasion from his wife Suru, for his disciple Song Darren's happiness, Tian Buyi finally at 3 days ago made a trip to Small Bamboo Valley, to propose marriage for Song Darren and Wen Min. Unexpectedly, Shui Yu Master, like she had swallowed some gunpowder, exploded at one go, even disregarding Suru who was there, not to mention her distressed disciple Wen Min who was beside, immediately rejected and coldly, sarcastically mocked Tian Buyi. With Tian Buyi's temperament, how would he not be angered? There and then had an altercation with Shui Yu Master and almost came to a fight. In the end, Suru barely pulled him back to Big Bamboo Valley and Shui Yu Master was also stopped by her group of disciples who kneeled and held her back. After the commotion, Song Darren was naturally extremely depressed, a look of dejection, all day long his face was like a bitter gourd. Tian Buyi who was already in a foul mood, saw his expression and was even more infuriated, scolded him in succession several times, said that so what if he did not have a wife, he just has to devote himself to cultivation, in the future who knows maybe he would instead have blessings in disguise etc. Song Darren naturally did not dare to contradict his mentor but although his mouth was answering obediently, his disapproval expression was written on his face, clearly he was still thinking of Wen Min. Tian Buyi was even angrier upon seeing it, scolded him even more harshly, until in the end Song Darren, like a mouse terrified of a cat, hid here and there the whole day, did not dare to see his teacher again. This day Suru left early, specifically told Tian Buyi to go Small Bamboo Valley himself to persuade Shui Yu Master. Tian Buyi snorted a few times, coldly made some snide remarks about Shui Yu Master. Suru ignored him, went off straight, leaving Tian Buyi to fume by himself. However before she left, Suru privately spoke a few words with Tian Buyi and made him understood somehow the reason why Shui Yu that woman was so unreasonable that day. Suru actually said it very simply, only said, I heard that the day before we went over, that is the day when Lu Shuiqi returned, Shui Yu's senior sister summoned her alone and they talked for quite a while. In the end for some reason, not only Lu Shuiqi was reprimanded heavily, even the other disciples were also admonished. Tian Buyi might look stiff but he was definitely not a slow person. After a moment he comprehended the reason behind it but just that after Suru left, each time he recalled himself going over by his own volition and being insulted, he really could not take it down and fumed with anger. The observed silence hall right now was silent, only the sounds of Tian Buyi's pacing footsteps. His expression too slowly changed with his movements. For some reason, in the end, his expression turned rather odd, as if he had recalled some things. The incident where Lu Shuiqi rejected the marriage proposal in Tongtian Peak, he was aware of it, and the rumors regarding the most outstanding disciple of the younger generation, Lu Shuiqi, Tian Buyi had also heard about it. Just that his concern deep inside his heart, was the other person in those rumors. 10 years already, he sighed softly, looking distracted, sometimes even he himself felt a little strange, the disciple who looked so unremarkable, what exactly was the reason that made himself worried for so many years? Tian Buyi made a bitter laugh, shook his head, at this moment, as if he suddenly sensed it, frowned and looked out of the observed silence hall. In the distant a tearing sound from the sky was heard. Tian Buyi contemplated for a moment, composed himself and walked out. A white light was only seen streaking past the sky above Big Bamboo Valley, as fast as lightning, directly headed for the summit of Big Bamboo Valley, landed 6 feet in front of Tian Buyi. The brilliant dazzling light wavered and dissipated, revealing Qingyun sect Tongtian Peak Xiao Yikai. Xiao Yikai turned, a smile on his face, cupped his hands together and said, Greetings to Tian teacher uncle. Tian Buyi nodded and said, Why did you come, is something up? Xiao Yikai smiled and nodded but following which he looked around, feeling slightly surprised, said, Tian teacher uncle, why is it so deserted here, where are your other disciples? Why are they not here? Tian Buyi thought in his heart, if you can see them then you must be seeing ghosts, one by one hiding off somewhere. But his expression was nothing like that, indifferently said, They are all doing their homework so did not come out. Here is unlike your Tong Tien Peak, crowded with people, it is common not to see anyone around. Xiao Yikai was stunned. He could hear that Tian Buyi seemed unhappy but he was shrewd enough and appeared not to notice, smiled and said, "Oh, so that's the reason. Tian teacher uncle, disciple is here today because my benevolent teacher tasked me to come and pay a visit to teacher uncle, there are some questions to seek your guidance on." Tian Buyi frowned and was nonplussed, asked in surprise, "Seek guidance from me, what guidance?" Senior brother Dao Zan is celestial pedant with unequaled merit good fortune, what is there to ask this good-for-nothing junior brother? Xiao Yikai smiled but did not speak, only looked at Tian Buyi. Tian Buyi understood and said, "Then let's go in and speak." After speaking, he turned and was about to head into the observed silence hall, Xiao Yikai following behind him. Suddenly Tian Buyi paused, abruptly turned around but it was towards the direction of his disciples' residences. Xiao Yikai felt puzzled and also glanced towards that direction but did not see anything, could not help but asked, "What is it Tian teacher uncle?" Tian Buyi hesitated for a moment, shook his head and said, "Nothing, I must have seen wrongly, how could he?" He suddenly coughed, lightly said, "Let's go in and talk." Xiao Yikai, feeling lost, took another glance towards that direction but only saw the neat rows of houses, silent, couldn't look any more normal. He did not give it much thought and only followed Tian Buyi into the hall. The two figures disappeared into the observed silence hall, the quiet atmosphere again enveloped the mountains of Big Bamboo Valley. After a period of time, suddenly in the corridors of that stretch of houses, a silhouette flashed, it was Ghost Li. He silently gazed towards the direction of observed silence hall for a moment and then turned and following a once extremely familiar winding corridor, unhurriedly walked in. Probably because this was in the afternoon. Not a single disciple was seen. In his memory, the most often heard sounds other than junior sister Tian Linger's crisp and clear laughters, would be Du Bishu's shouts with a tinge of dejection because he must have lost another bet. Then, big brother Song Darren and the rest deep and resounding laughters would be heard, the other senior brothers would also add on their jokes and for that most unremarkable little disciple. Most likely would also be smiling in one of the corner. Not long after, the past, in the unhurried footsteps sounds, gently flipped over, those old stories as if engraved in every tile, pillar and buildings, echoed beside him. Initially Ghost Li's face was dazed, gradually it changed, the ice-like expression quietly receded, the past was actually this soul-stirring, even after many years he still could not forget it. If everything had not changed. He stood in the faint sunlight of the corridor, slowly sat down onto the low railings, the warm and pleasant sunlight shone onto his face, like a decade ago. There were footsteps and conversations, traveling far from the back, approaching, it was Big Bamboo Valley 4th disciple, Hidaji and 6th disciple, Du Bishu. Two of them walked side by side approaching and when their figures appeared, Ghost Li had already like an apparition, suddenly disappeared, the mountain breeze blew past, the trees and vegetation swayed, nobody knew where exactly he was hiding. Hidaji and Du Bishu obviously did not notice anything, both of them whispering and slowly walked past. Du Bishu was also carrying a wooden bucket, filled half with water, a rag draped beside, like he was going somewhere to clean up. And they walked forward and soon arrived at a door of a house. Du Bishu shrugged his shoulders at Hidaji, Hidaji smiled and both of them went in together. A moment later, Ghost Li appeared from another corner of the winding corridor, his eyes' expression complicated and looking ahead. The room that the two people who were once his senior brothers entered, was actually his when he was still Zhang Xiaofan Big Bamboo Valley most junior disciple. However, that house should have been abandoned for many years, why did the two senior brothers still go in? Ghost Li quietly drifted over. Suddenly, like sinking into an old dream, he stood nonplussed at the door. In this little courtyard, everything was exactly the same as before. There was still a narrow path made of crushed stones, there was still verdant green grasses, even that small pine tree was still growing there, just that over the years, it had already grown much sturdier. The sound of water was heard from inside the house, following which Du Bishu and Hidaji's voices were heard. Fourth senior brother, why don't you try to explain, after so many years, why does teacher still want us to clean up this house? Isn't this deliberately trying to make me suffer? Hidaji scolded laughingly, stinking brat, you are trying to loaf on the job again right, I am telling you first, teacher is still fuming over big senior brother's matter. You better don't provoke him, if not teacher would for sure skin you alive. Du Bishu laughed dryly, said, senior brother you are joking with me again, how would I dare to provoke teacher? Just that little junior brother has already left for more than a decade, yet teacher still order us to maintain this place as it is, cleaning it every day. I really do not know what is he thinking in his heart. That figure standing outside the house, stood erect stiff, slowly lowered his head. From the house, Hidaji was silent for a while and instead sighed, quietly said, although teacher never talked about little junior brother all these years, but we all know that in his heart, his favorite is junior brother Xiaofan. Du Bishu's voice said, yes. This I can tell too, to tell you the truth, sometimes I also missed little junior brother. But what use is that, little junior brother right now has already become another person. Don't tell me he would still return to Big Bamboo Valley, again become Zhang Xiaofan, and be our 7th junior brother. Outside the window, Ghost Li's expression turned more and more indifferent. His body was still straight, just that his 2 hands were clenched into a fist, gripping tighter and tighter. Can we turn back? The steps that you strided in the time, the roads that you have crossed, many years later, do you still remember to look back? Do you still want to go back? The warm sunlight on his body, yet felt like being cast in ice. Hidaji and Du Bishu also turned silent, as if inadvertently this topic made them also felt heavy and wordless. After tidying up for a while, carrying a bucket out, Hidaji gently shut the door. He watched the green grasses in the small courtyard, the pine tree swaying, although the scenery had a look of spring, but it always had some feeling of loneliness. As if without the owner of the house, even the scenery of spring also turned pale. He shook his head, sighed and left with Du Bishu. After a long time, Ghost Li from behind that pine tree, slowly walked out. The familiar mountain breeze blew past his face, ruffling his hair. He walked to the room door, raised his right hand and placed it on the door. His movement was very slow, as if his hands were heavily laden, even his face expression, he looked like he couldn't breathe. However, that strange inexplicable feeling, like an invisible force, finally pushed open the door. Just like opening a window of the past, looking into the past time. That familiar bed, that familiar tables and chairs, as well as what was hanging on the wall. After those years the painting of Dao character already had a slight decayed yellow color, even the kettle and cups looked exactly the same. Who would know, this simple and plain room, how many times had it appeared in his dreams? Even the smell of the air here also seemed to carry a faint smell of the past. He slowly walked into the room, went to the bed and slowly sat down, gently stroked his bed bedding, the soft feeling traversed from his palm. Who would see him suddenly biting on his lip, that hard, that deep? In the observed silence hall, Tian Buyi and Xiao Yikai sat down together. Tian Buyi looked unsettled, facing Xiao Yikai, but his eyes were looking at another direction, as if contemplating something. Until Xiao Yikai coughed once and called out, "Tian teacher uncle." Tian Buyi, like being awakened, nodded his head and said, all right, say it. What does senior brother Dao Zan want that requires you, his favorite disciple, to especially make a trip down? Xiao Yikai smiled and said, you flatter me. It is like this, benevolent teacher has 2 things, wish to ask Tian teacher uncle through disciple. Tian Buyi said, oh, say it. Xiao Yikai said, firstly, the number of good factions fellow members coming to Qingyun Hill is still increasing. The other branches have already received quite a number of people. Tongtian Peak has also arranged 100 over fellow friends to stay in the houses at mid-level of the mountain. However, even it is so, the residences are still not enough. So teacher wanted disciple to entreat teacher uncle, possible to arrange more of the good faction friends on Big Bamboo Valley. Tian Buyi's eyebrow twitched, glanced at Xiao Yikai. Xiao Yikai looked a little awkward, but still with a courtesy smile, said, teacher uncle, this is also for the imminent catastrophe, a last resort, and our Qingyun sect has always considered ourselves as the leader of good faction. We can't push our fellow friends out of the door, right? Tian Buyi snorted, said, don't treat me as a fool. Those so-called righteous fellow friends, when it is really time to fight those demon beast monsters, those that can really contribute is less than 30%, most of them probably only because of our fame, ran over here to take refuge. Xiao Yikai gave a wry smile, said, Tian teacher uncle over-exaggerate, but even if it is so, we can't push them out of the door. If we really do so, how would the world look at our Qingyun? For the sake of the overall situation, would have to request Tian teacher uncle to render more help. Tian Buyi rolled his eyes, suddenly seemed to think of something, his eyes suddenly lit up, a mocking smile revealed at the corner of his mouth, coughed once and his face revealed a righteous awe-inspiring expression, said, since Dao Zan's senior brother also said it like this, I shall not decline further, anyway it is for the world good faction and the current situation, then let's do it that way. Xiao Yikai was overjoyed, cupped his hands and said, "Thank you teacher uncle." Tian Buyi smiled then suddenly raised his hand and said, "Just a minute, I have not finished." Xiao Yikai was startled for a moment, said, "What?" "Tian teacher uncle please say." Tian Buyi smiled, said, "Since the calamity is imminent, everything should be for the sake of the current situation. I heard among our 7 branches, there is still one branch, seems like the branch which has more female disciples." Xiao Yikai, who was initially smiling, his face already stiff halfway, gradually could not smile anymore. Tian Buyi naturally smiled by himself, said, "I remember in that branch, their terrain vast and a few days ago I have been there, the number of empty houses are innumerable. Why is it that sect head senior brother who has been brilliant his entire life, did not even think of this place?" Xiao Yikai forced a smile, after a long while said, "Tian teacher uncle, this. Tian Buyi snorted, his plump face looked up to the sky, silent. Xiao Yikai saw his expression, secretly shook his head and could only said, "Yes, after disciple returns today, we'll take it to report to benevolent teacher and ask him to make a decision." Tian Buyi did not speak and his expression also did not change, only nodded his head, but he was feeling delighted in his heart, laughing secretly inside. Xiao Yikai composed himself for a moment then said, "Then Tian teacher uncle, there is the second thing but more important than the matter just now. Teacher has also repeatedly reminded for teacher uncle to think carefully before answering." Tian Buyi saw Xiao Yikai's serious face, greatly different from before, evidently this matter was not something trivial, could not help but feel stunned, nodded and said, "Oh, what is it that is so serious, say it." Chapter 157 Paying Respect. Xiao Yikai lowered his voice, his expression turned slightly solemn, said, "Asking teacher uncle on teacher's behalf, the heaven secret seal, behind Big Bamboo Valley, is it still safe and sound?" Tian Buyi's expression changed, suddenly stood up, stared at the Xiao Yikai. Xiao Yikai also slowly stood up but took a step back instead. Tian Buyi watched Xiao Yikai for a while, his face's expression constantly changing, initially was shocked and surprise, slowly after calming down he looked to be contemplating and finally a strange glint seemed to flash past his eyes. He looked at Xiao Yikai, suddenly said, "Seems like senior brother Daozan really intended to pass his position of sect head to you in the future." Xiao Yikai slightly bowed, said, "Teacher uncle overstates, disciple dare not." Tian Buyi indifferently said, "He even told you this matter, his intention is obviously very clear." "Forget it, this is Tong Tian Peak's matter, I can't be bothered to. But regarding the heaven secret seal," he paused, in a deep voice said, "this is no trivial matter and even concerned Qingyun destiny. At that time Qingyi founder once commanded the Qingyun 7 branches leaders, not to use unless out of absolute necessity." He took a deep breath, said, "The implications of it, all of us understands it very well. I just want to ask one question, does Daozan's senior brother really thought about this carefully?" Xiao Yikai's expression at the moment was also very solemn, after deliberating for a long time as if he dared not say the wrong word, nodded and said, "Yes, before disciple left, teacher had already solemnly instructed disciple." Tian Buyi after contemplating for a moment, said, "Other than Tong Tian Peak and Big Bamboo Valley, what about the other 5 branches, Heaven's secret seal?" Xiao Yikai respectfully said, "For this matter, teacher has only told disciple and no others, because teacher thinks that in Qingyun sect, Tian teacher uncle is the most prestigious and noble, therefore especially came here first to seek teacher uncle's opinion. As for the other 5 branches, disciple will pay a visit to the various leaders later." Tian Buyi slowly nodded and sat back down. After thinking for a long time, he sighed and said, "The situation before us has indeed come to a critical juncture. The fate of the common people are all depending on this war. If sect head senior brother wishes to go all out, I have nothing to say to. Just that after you go return, please relay one sentence to him for me." Xiao Yikai looking respectful, said, "Yes, Tian teacher uncle please say, disciple will definitely convey it." Tian Buyi's face slightly pale, said, "Once the 7 branches heaven's secret seals are removed, the vicious energy that Qingyun Hill suppressed for 1,000 years will inevitably be released, although there is still Zhu Xian ancient celestial sword's energy to hold it and turn it into an unparalleled killing intention, but the severe damage to the sword holder corrodes the foundation of the cultivation. It is not a laughing matter. Daozan senior brother's skills are exquisite and deep, but this is a serious matter. It is better to ask him to consider carefully to guard against the unexpected." Xiao Yikai seriously said, "Yes, Tian teacher uncle's words, disciple will definitely convey it." After pausing for a moment, he continued, Then if Tian teacher uncle has no other matter, disciple will first make a move. Tian Buyi nodded, did not speak. Xiao Yikai saw his heavy mood, did not dare to speak more, slowly retreated out. In the observed silence hall, only Tian Buyi was left. He slowly turned around, looked at the Taoism Sanqing founder deity statue worshipped in the observed silence hall, his expression complicated. After a long while he only sighed and did not say anything. When Xiao Yikai flew back to Tongtian Peak, it was already night, lights lit brightly on Tongtian Peak, so it was many of the senior Qingyun sect disciples, including the numerous good faction members who had came to Qingyun, turning this paradise-like place into a slightly crowded and secular place. However, Xiao Yikai did not have the mood to bother about these. He went straight to the peak where Crystal Hall was. After asking the whereabouts of Reverend Dao Zan from Qingyun junior disciples in Crystal Hall, he headed for Reverend Dao Xuan's room at the inner quarters of Crystal Hall. Coming to a secluded area of the rear rooms, Xiao Yikai stood before Reverend Dao Xuan's room door, composed himself and was about to knock when Reverend Dao Xuan's voice was heard from the room, saying, "Is it Yikai? Come on in." Xiao Yikai was nonplussed for a moment, immediately respectfully said, "Yes." Then gently pushed open the door and went inside. The room was very spacious, all of the furnishings had a scholarliness quality. Other than a simple table, chairs and bed, were numerous books on the bookshelves placed at both sides of the room, many of which were old books but were neatly placed on the shelves. They looked like they had been read many times by their owner. Reverend Dao Zan was sitting beside the study desk, his hand holding an old scroll, was reading it when he saw Xiao Yikai came in. He smiled and said, "You are back only now." Xiao Yikai respectfully bowed and said, "Yes, teacher." Reverend Dao Zan nodded his head and said, "How is it?" Xiao Yikai said, "The 7 branches, leaders did not have any objection, all said to follow teacher's intention, only Big Bamboo Valley Tian teacher uncle." Reverend Dao Zan frowned and said, "Why, what different opinion does Tian junior brother has?" Xiao Yikai quickly said, "It is not so, Tian teacher uncle did not object to, he only requested disciple to relay a few words to teacher." Reverend Dao Zan was slightly surprised, said, "What words, tell me." Xiao Yikai repeated what Tian Buyi said. Reverend Dao Zan was silent after listening. Xiao Yikai secretly sneaked a glance at him. Reverend Dao Xuan's expression looked complicated, he seemed to be thinking about something. While Xiao Yikai was trying to guess what Reverend Dao Zan was thinking when Reverend Dao Zan suddenly said, "Yikai, what do you think of Tian teacher uncle this person?" Xiao Yikai was surprised and did not know the subtle meaning of Reverend Dao Xuan's words. He looked at him but did not see anything particular and so could only cautiously said, disciple thinks, Tian teacher uncle this person, is actually quite nice." Reverend Dao Zan smiled, apparently was not bothered by this disciple tricky words, leisurely said, "Ah yes. He is a good man, it must have been difficult with his looks at that time, his extraordinary talent could actually be discerned by someone." Reverend Dao Xuan's words suddenly stopped, the room submerged into silence. Xiao Yikai moved his body slightly, felt somehow uneasy. A moment later, Reverend Dao Zan said, "You have been out for a day, and must be tired, go back and have a rest." Xiao Yikai nodded, bowed and said, "Yes." Then slowly backed out. Reverend Dao Zan watched his favorite disciple's figure gradually disappeared, was silent for a moment and then again viewed the dark black sky outside the window, slowly stood up and walked out. Soon, his figure merged into the dark night of Qingyun Hill. Although it was late at night but at the founder's ancestral hall at the secluded back of Tongtian Peak, the altar lamp was still burning in the dark, like an otherworldly fire. The old man who was keeping watch over the hall was still up. Right now he was standing before the offering table for Qingyun Hill generations of ancestors' tablets, staring at the names within the dark shadows. Distantly, low insects' cries were heard. In the silence, there seemed to be heartbeat sounds. The night breeze blew past, the altar lamp fire flickered, trembling like breathing. The old man slowly turned around, walked to the altar lamp, gently blocked the incoming wind. Soon, the fire quietened down and started to burn steadily again. The old man gazed at this light, the light reflected in his eyes, like something was burning. In the middle of the night, footsteps sounds were suddenly heard. The old man's brows wrinkled slightly, carefully listened and then slowly turned around. His old voice unhurriedly said, "Didn't expect that you will still come at such a late hour." Reverend Dao Xuan's figure slowly emerged from the dark and walked into the founder's ancestral hall. In the dim light, the two elderly men met across each other. For a moment was stunned, caught unaware and suddenly realized that the other party was actually so old and then thought, isn't he himself also the same case? Reverend Daozan was silent, stared at that old man for a long time and then slowly came to the table, stood under the Qingyun sect generations of ancestors' tablets, slowly straightened his body. The old man walked to his back and was too silent. In the dark, invisible dignified aura emitted slowly from those, like deep scars that time could not erase. Reverend Daozan, expressionless, picked up 3 incense sticks from the table, walked to the candle and lighted them, holding solemnly with both of his hands, respectfully bowed 3 times to the ancestral tablets and then stepped forward and inserted into the incense burner. The faint smoke, curled up from burner, diffused in the midair, making those ancestral tablets look even more hazy, indistinctly like a pair of eyes, coldly looking at these 2 old men in this world. Offering incense in the middle of the night, is there any difficult problems? The old man asked indifferently, his tone flat, like he was talking about something that had nothing to do with himself. Reverend Daozan did not look back at him, his eyes staring at those dignified tablets behind the faint smoke. A moment later, he slowly said, "Say, after we have passed on, when the later generations offer sacrifices to us, what kind of feelings will they be having?" The old man grunted, said, "For you, naturally it will be full of reverence, as for me, will anyone still remember me?" Reverend Daozan did not take offense on the elderly's slightly sarcastic words, only faintly smiled. Then he quietly said, "Now that the catastrophe is before us, the world is plunged into misery, suffering from the rampant actions of the evil beasts. When I think of the inevitable war between Qingyun and the evil beast, and the world's fate is at risk, all of these heavy responsibilities on my shoulder, I have not slept well for many days." The old man brow frowned, said, "You are not complaining to me, right? This is not like you." Reverend Daozan looked at the old man a moment, suddenly laughed out and then sighed, "You and I, our hundreds of years of friendship, it is only you who know me best." The old man shook his head and said, "I know you. If so, I will not be here guarding the ancestral hall." "All right, let's not talk superfluous words, what exactly are you trying to say?" Reverend Daozan seemed to be particularly tolerant of the elderly man, he retorted several times but Daozan did not mind, looking slightly solemn, he slowly said, "I have already decided, the implications of this battle is too great, for the survival of the common people, I want to remove the heaven secret seals of the 7 mountain summits of Qingyun." That old man's face suddenly froze, his brows frowning deeply, looked intently at Daozan. Daozan looked frankly back at him. After a long time later, the old man slowly said, "This matter, you have thought over it carefully." Daozan slowly nodded and said, "But today when I secretly informed the other 6 leaders, Tian Buyi requested someone to convey some words to me, advised me to be careful of the vicious energy backlash." The old man smiled coldly, turned to face those ancestral tablets, after a long while, said, "It's not like you have not entered illusory moon cave before, what is inside, you know if yourself." His voice suddenly turned gentler, also with a trace of helplessness, said, "Look out for yourself." Reverend Daozan did not speak, a moment later too raised his head, watching the shadows in the darkness, that silent dignity, seemed to be mocking silently in the dark. 7 days later, the areas around Qingyun Hill started to have more and more news of the demonic beasts, within a radius of 100 miles, with Heyong City at the foot of the mountain as center, everywhere refuges could be seen. As if right now the world, only that towering and lofty Qingyun Hill, could give some comfort and security feelings to the people. And in the hubbub of the crowds, Heyong City was the most chaotic, the streets were full of people, the city's inns were long full, the incoming refugees could only sleep in the open. Under such circumstances, the city's food supply had become extremely tight. Fortunately the city was beside the river, they did not have to worry about the water supply. Actually under such chaotic situation, it would be difficult to ensure that there would not be looting and murder and other bad things and the fact was, from time to time there was really such news, the previous day who and who had disappeared and today someone's corpse was on the street. But Heyong City was after all at the foot of Qingyun Hill. Qingyun Hill had also made some early preparations, dispatched a considerable number of disciples in the city to maintain order so in general those numerous refugees in this catastrophe were still safe. But, following the rumors of the demonic beast spreading worse and worse with each day, who could predict what tomorrow would be like? Under these circumstances, Heyong City's atmosphere became more and more uneasy. And also in such circumstances, Zhou Yixian who roamed the Zhonghu together with his granddaughter, Xiao Huan, and Wild Dog Taoist, came to this city. Standing in the streets which used to be spacious, right now they could only see dense population of humans' heads moving, It was crowded to the point where it was hard to even walk. Wild Dog Taoist was still alright, but Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan was dumbfounded. Relying on Wild Dog Taoist's sturdy body and fierce-looking face, he opened the way for them. Those weaker ones were pushed aside. Those stronger ones who saw Wild Dog Taoist's face when they turned around, most did not dare to say anything. Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan followed Wild Dog closely, managed to move forward, sweating profusely along the way, and finally passed through this street, into another small alley on the west side of the city. The three walked on, although the secluded alley right now was also full of people, but compared to the big street outside, here could said to be spacious. Zhou Yixian cursed softly, looked extremely pissed. Forget it that I, this old man, have to run for my life. Why are there so many people too running for their lives? In the end make me this old man so uncomfortable while running for my life, and so on. The alley was very long, twisted and turned, lesser and lesser people headed in. After walking about an hour, the three of them reached the end of the alley. There was no longer any refugees in this area. The reason was very simple, because there was morgue here, but looking at this small morgue derelict courtyard, even half of its wooden door had fell to the ground, the other half missing, not sure if it was taken by people for firewood. Zhou Yixian looked at this morgue, shook his head, sighed. Xiao Huan stood beside him, whispered, said, "Grandfather." Single quote. Wild Dog was puzzled, but he came from the evil sect and was not bothered by these ominous morgue, feeling slightly bewildered that Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan would come to this place. Zhou Yixian, after a long while, said, "Let's go in. Anyway, this place should be relatively quiet." When he finished, he first went inside. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog followed behind. They saw in the small courtyard, trees and grasses bleak and desolated, remnants of wood shavings and roof beams could be seen lying disorderly everywhere. There were some white stuffs in the grasses that glimmered. Xiao Huan looked pale and could not help but pulled Zhou Yixian's clothes. Zhou Yixian turned and looked at her, quietly reassured her, "It's not the first time here. What are you afraid of? Besides, here is where your father lives. Will he harm us?" Xiao Huan nodded, her face looking better. Wild Dog Taoist frowning at the back but did not say anything. Ahead of the courtyard was the door to the morgue. Zhou Yixian went up and saw the door was covered with dust. Just how long did no one come? He did not speak, shook his head, another sigh, and opened the door. Ji-ya, the wooden door made a harsh sound, slowly retreated inside. A moldy smell assaulted them. In the dim light, 3 coffins were lying disorderly, but the coffins' covers had already dropped to the side. The years of desolation, as if in this small room, slowly emitted out. Zhou Yixian's mouth twitched, his face bleak, slowly walked in. Disregarding those coffins, he walked straight to the offering table, looked at the spiritual tablets that were lying disorderly. The room was quiet. It seemed that no one dared to speak. Zhou Yixian slowly stretched his hand out, picked up the tablets and slowly wiped the thick layer of dust, placed it beside and then found another one, and so on. When he cleared the 7th spiritual tablets, saw that the tablet read, "Tablet of beloved son of Zhou Xingyun." Zhou Yixian stopped, silently looked at the tablet. After gazing for a long time, Xiao Huan slowly walked over, saw the tablet in his hand, teared and quietly said, "Grandfather, keep father's spiritual tablet properly away." Zhou Yixian heaved a long sigh, his face looked desolate, nodded his head. Xiao Huan took the tablet from his hands, carefully placed it on the table and then stepped back, placed her hands together, respectfully bowed to the tablet, quietly said, "Father, I have come with grandfather again to visit you, these few years thanks to your blessing, although grandfather and I roam the world but everything is good. Today we came back to clean you up properly, hope you will not blame us." She then respectfully bowed 3 times. Wild Dog Taoist watched from the back, suddenly came to the front and also bowed 3 times to the tablet. Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan were instead shocked. Xiao Huan exclaimed, "Priest, why did you?" Wild Dog Taoist did not look at Zhou Yixian's strange expression, said, "Since he is your father, he is also my senior, coming here, paying respect to senior, it is ought to." Xiao Huan then felt relieved, nodded and said, "Then I thank you." She turned to the tablet and said, "Father, this is Wild Dog Taoist, he is a good man and gave a lot of help to grandfather and me." Zhou Yixian snorted, said, "Is he considered a good person?" Snort snort, harboring evil intentions. Wild Dog Taoist's expression froze, but Xiao Huan had already glared at Zhou Yixian, said, "Grandfather, how can you talk nonsense?" Zhou Yixian rolled up his eyes, turned around to look elsewhere. Wild Dog Taoist gratefully looked at Xiao Huan and was about to speak when suddenly his body stiffened and he abruptly turned around. Xiao Huan and Zhou Yixian seemed to sense something, almost at the same time looked towards the entrance. In the desolate quiet morgue, at the entrance, suddenly a man in black appeared, even his face was also veiled in black, an unexplainable weirdness. The ambience created by Zhou Yixian and the rest, right now with the appearance of the man, suddenly sank into a even deathly silence. Wild Dog Taoist's expression changed greatly, his lips moved a few times and finally slowly hoarsely said, "Mr. Ghost." Chapter 158 Night Exploration. The black-attired person standing at the entrance was indeed the mysterious figure of Ghost King Sect, Mr. Ghost. Wild Dog Taoist, after being subdued by Ghost Li, stayed at Ghost King Sect for a period of time and had at least seen Mr. Ghost a few times, although as to what kind of person Mr. Ghost was, he still knew very little, but he clearly understood the fact that that person's status was not low and not one that could be mentioned in the same breath as him. Now that he encountered this person at such place out of a sudden, how would Wild Dog Taoist not be shocked? Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan did not know the identity of this mysterious man in black, but looking at the faint look of fear on Wild Dog Taoist's face, expected that this person most likely was not a good person and could not help but tense up. Mr. Ghost paused in his drift. He did not expect that there were people in this secluded unfortunate place and one of them even recognized him. He could not help but be startled. A moment later he took a good look at the three people, especially at Wild Dog Taoist. Mr. Ghost then calmed down. He assessed Wild Dog Taoist and again at Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan and finally back to Wild Dog. His calm voice said, "Are you Wild Dog Taoist?" Wild Dog Taoist had seen this Mr. Ghost several times previously and usually behind Ghost Li and Ghost King Sect, looking at this mysterious black figure from afar. Now that Mr. Ghost was right in front of him, it was the first time. When he heard Mr. Ghost speaking and actually recognized himself, he could not help but was startled, paused for a while before saying, "Yes." Mr. Ghost faintly said, "Aren't you always with Ghost Li Gongzi? Why are you at this place, and who are these two people?" Wild Dog Taoist wanted to ask him back, why couldn't he come when he himself could be here, but he didn't dare to speak it out, only quietly said, I separated from Ghost Li and will go look for him soon. These two are my friends." Mr. Ghost's words were insipid, as if totally ignoring Wild Dog Taoist's tone of emphasis, whether intentionally or not, on Ghost Li. These two words, said, "Oh, okay, but you still have not say, why are you here?" Wild Dog Taoist was speechless for a moment and did not know how to explain. Instead it was Zhou Yixian, who was watching Mr. Ghost for a while, spoke, "It is because this old man me has a relative spirit tablet here, we came to pay our respect." Mr. Ghost's gaze concentrated and then saw, behind the three of them, a derelict spirit tablet was erected on the altar table. A few words were written on it, "Beloved Son Zhou Xingyun Memorial Tablet." Mr. Ghost nodded and then pondered a moment. The gleam in the eyes behind the veil seemed to be flickering, unhurriedly said, "Since you all have already paid your respect, this place is after all for spirits' tombs, it is not advisable to stay for a long time, better quickly leave." Wild Dog Taoist turned to Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan. He was clearly unwilling to stay a minute longer with this ghostly figure, and with Mr. Ghost's words, seemed like if it was not because of Ghost Li, he might used his skills to retain them. But even though it was so, Wild Dog Taoist was not sure if Zhou Yixian understood that they could not afford to offend this person, and when he glanced over just now, Zhou Yixian had deep affections for his son who died young, and now that out of a sudden someone abruptly issued an order for the guests to leave, with his usual temperament, not sure if he would explode with anger. Sure enough, when the Wild Dog Taoist turned back to look, his heart suddenly sank. Zhou Yixian was still fine, his face tight and seemed to be contemplating something. His eyes too seemed to be strangely wandering around. Xiao Huan's graceful face instead revealed anger, obviously infuriated by this man in black's words. Her mouth opened and she seemed about to rebuke. Wild Dog Taoist panicked, sweat appeared on his forehead, crying in alarm in his heart. While he was panicking, suddenly Zhou Yixian stepped forward, walked to Xiao Huan and blocked her. Xiao Huan was about to speak and got a shock, said, "You this, grandfather, what are you doing?" Zhou Yixian glanced at Mr. Ghost, who was standing at the entrance like a ghost, indifferently said, "Nothing, we came to only visit your dad. Since we have already paid our respects, let us go, anyway we don't have anything to do here." Xiao Huan was nonplussed, for a moment speechless. Wild Dog Taoist heaved a sigh of relief, his heart which had jumped to his throat returned to its place, hurriedly walked forward, said, yes, we better quickly leave." Xiao Huan was a clever girl, comprehended the situation and did not insist, nodded her head. The three of them hastily packed up their things, with Wild Dog Taoist letting, walked to the entrance. Mr. Ghost quietly let out a path, drifted into the dim area of this tomb place, looking like Inspector The three of them quickly walked out of this house. The sun shone down on them once again. After a few steps, the door behind them was heard closing by itself without any draft, making an eerie sound of woo-woo, and with a pong, shut close. After walking with quick steps and leaving this morgue far behind, almost not in their line of view anymore, the three of them then stopped. Wild Dog Taoist and Zhou Yixian heaved out a long sigh at the same time. Xiao Huan glanced at them, frowned and said, "What happened to both of you? Why so afraid?" Zhou Yixian ignored her, pondered with his head bowed and then raised his head up and spoke to Wild Dog Taoist. "I heard you called him something Mr. Ghost, who is he?" Wild Dog Taoist hesitated for a moment, said, "He is the most mysterious figure in Ghost King sect, like an honored elder figure. Usually he is always with Ghost King. I am not sure too what kind of person is he, but he is definitely not an ordinary figure." Zhou Yixian, frowning tightly, did not speak. Xiao Huan felt puzzled. Her grandfather seldom went into deep thoughts, could not help but curiously asked, "Grandfather, what is it? Do you feel that this person is strange too?" Zhou Yixian slowly nodded, his speech slow and serious, said, "This person is indeed not a simple person, we cannot underestimate him. And just now in the house, did you all notice at the right-hand corner, 3 kai away from the wall, what is it?" Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist were stunned, carefully recalled, but it was still Xiao Huan who was more detailed, frowned and said, "Grandfather, I remembered other than the coffins lying in a mess there isn't anything else." Zhou Yixian coldly snorted, said, "Right, it is coffins." Wild Dog Taoist asked in bewilderment, "What is strange about coffins? That is a mortuary, naturally there are coffins." Zhou Yixian rolled his eyes at him, said, "What do you this good-for-nothing know? Of course the other coffins are not important, but there is one coffin that is different from the rest. It is not only cleaner with less dust than the rest, its position facing the north and south are extremely accurate, and especially its location is at where the yin energy is densest in that mortuary." Zhou Yixian's expression became more serious and said, "Actually I too did not thought about these. That coffin was not that conspicuous, but when Wild Dog first called out that Mr. Ghost, my heart jumped and I secretly observed the house's unearthly feng shui, and really, it showed me some hints. I'm afraid this person is really from the way of ghost and uses the yin energy to recuperate." However, Zhou Yixian looked bemused, slowly bent his head, perplexedly said, "Just that although the cultivation ways in the evil sector mostly unusual, but this kind of forces of evil skills seems to be more commonly seen in southern border shaman witchcraft. How can it be that this person has it?" Wild Dog Taoist suddenly interrupted and said, "That is not necessarily so. There is an old fellow in Wandu clan named Blood-Sucking Demon. Other than his famous blood-sucking skill, doesn't he also knows 5 ghost-governed spirits formation?" Zhou Yixian, with a pate sound, said, "Don't try to act like you know. That useless blood-sucking demon fellow learned some short-changed skills from somewhere, forcibly captured some innocent spirits and then deliberately acted mystery to deceive people. When it was time to really use it, most likely he would be struck down once he uses his skills. The southern border shaman witchcraft is extensive and profound, and has even more exceptional achievements in the way of ghost faction. How can it be mentioned in the same breath as that useless thing?" Wild Dog Taoist was stunned, but recalling back, he felt that it was really as what Zhou Yixian had described. The person that blood-sucking demon ambushed on the road was the Qingyun disciple, Zhang Xiaofan. When he first used the 5 ghosts-governed spirits, his formation was broken inexplicably by Zhang Xiaofan, although the situation was rather bizarre and weird and Zhang Xiaofan's weapon was sinister, but in any case it was because the blood-sucking demon was useless. As such, Wild Dog Taoist could not help but felt somehow disdain towards that blood-sucking demon and had forgotten how he had struggled and begged for mercy from him. Xiao Huan, standing beside him, frowned and said, "Grandfather, but however, Father's spirit tablet is still in the house. Now that there is a monster inside, will it be all right?" Zhou Yixian slowly shook his head, said, "Your father had passed away for many years. This instead doesn't matter, but in there after all is where your father's spirit tablet is. I only have one son, I cannot just ignore it." Wild Dog Taoist was startled, stared and said, "What did you say?" Zhou Yixian snorted and said, "Naturally I want to go back and take a look again. I cannot just leave like this." Wild Dog Taoist's face turned pale for a moment, angrily said, "That is someone you nor me can afford to provoke, do you know?" Zhou Yixian, with a pate sound, ignored him, muttered to himself, "According to logic, this type of martial artist from the way of ghost, the yin energy at night is the strongest. It is also the best time for him to recuperate quietly. If we were to explore, it is best to do it during the day. Just that since we encountered him, we can't go back this early, we better wait for the night." Xiao Huan nodded, said, "All right." and then thought of something, turned and spoke to Wild Dog Taoist, "Priest, why not you don't come along? Grandfather and I, because of my father's spirit tablet which is still there, we are really worried and therefore we have to go back." Wild Dog Taoist, after being looked at by Xiao Huan's bright eyes, was about to speak with his mouth opened, suddenly shut his mouth, after a long while, said, "Let's go together." Xiao Huan was surprised but still smiled and said, "Oh, is it? He, priest, you are really a good man." Wild Dog Taoist was silent. Zhou Yixian, who was beside, he sneered, his tone seemed to suggest something else. And so the three of them waited in this secluded alley. Initially they could still see a few human figures from a distance, but as the day turned night, even those few shadows also gradually disappeared. Most likely it was because of the mortuary. When the night finally came, the Heyang city, which was bustling for the whole day, the people shrouded in fear of the calamity, finally passed another day. Tired, the people in every corner of the city, carrying their fear and at loss for the future, quietly fell asleep. Who would bother about things happening around them? There was no moon in the night sky, dark clouds heavy. Heyang city appeared to be a blanket of dimness. Only at the distant horizon, there were 1 or 2 weak stars, facing each other from a distance, emitting faint lights. The night wind blew, carrying a trace of chill and cold, making a thin whining sound, quietly blowing past the top of the city. The three of them quietly came to the entrance of the mortuary at the end of the alley. Under the dim light, they could vaguely make out the derelict entrance walls. The cold wind su blew. There seemed to be a chilly wind blowing constantly from within. Zhou Yixian's neck shrank, seemed like he was cold. Wild Dog Taoist beside him also had the chills in his heart, but he quietly looked to the side, saw Xiao Huan's graceful figure was just standing beside him, her face also tensed and watching the darkness ahead. Wild Dog Taoist's initial cowardice disappeared without a trace. Zhou Yixian watched that darkness for a long time. He seemed to be contemplating something. After a long time turned around, took out a few yellow paper charms from his bosom, twisted obscure drawings indistinctly could be seen drawn on it, unable to see clearly what they were exactly in the darkness. Zhou Yixian passed 2 to Xiao Huan, hesitated for a moment, stretched his hand and also gave 2 to Wild Dog Taoist, whispered, "These 2 spiritual charms, the big one keep it concealed close to your body, it can ward the ghostly energy from invading the body, the small one keep it in your hands, if things go wrong, immediately recite the incantation and you can escape." After speaking, Zhou Yixian quietly told them the incantation. Xiao Huan most likely had already knew the incantation, nodded and looked relaxed, but Wild Dog Taoist instead felt overwhelmed. He had never heard those strange incantations. Not only it was a mouthful to say, it twisted and turned, extremely difficult to memorize. Wild Dog Taoist almost doubted, if really something were to happen, before he could finish reciting, he would already be dead in Mr. Ghost's hands. But whatever it was, although he didn't know if Zhou Yixian, this Zhonghu scammer's magic would work this time, Wild Dog Taoist in the end still memorized with his heart. After about the time to brew a cup of tea, he finally managed to remember this mouthful of incantations. Zhou Yixian listened to Wild Dog Taoist's recitation of the incantation, nodded his head in indication. This time while teaching Wild Dog Taoist the skills to escape, it was rare to see him not losing his temper, not sure if it was because he himself knew the incantations were too hard to remember. Zhou Yixian composed himself, pointed in the direction of the mortuary entrance. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist both nodded at the same time. Zhou Yixian inhaled deeply, then slowly moved his feet forward. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist followed behind him. They could only see darkness ahead, an unexplainable strangeness. And at this tense moment, suddenly behind them in a distance, faint sounds were heard. Gg, gg. The sound was similar to the cries of the insects on normal days. Zhou Yixian and Wild Dog Taoist did not mind it, but Xiao Huan suddenly shook, whipped her head around, looked behind. Her abrupt action shocked the 2 men, thinking something had happened, quickly turned around to investigate but found nothing behind. Zhou Yixian asked in surprise, "Xiao Huan, what is it?" Xiao Huan's expression was uncertain, looked a little strange too, hesitated for a moment, said, "Grandfather, I seem to hear Xiao Wei calling." Zhou Yixian frowned, said, "Xiao Wei, what Xiao Wei?" His voice suddenly froze, whispered, "You mean that monkey beside Ghost Li?" Xiao Huan nodded, but her face looked slightly confused, slowly said, "But now there is no sound, have I mistaken it?" Both Zhou Yixian and Wild Dog Taoist looked far into the small alley and saw only darkness. Where are Ghost Li and Xiao Hui's shadows? Zhou Yixian stared at Xiao Huan. Xiao Huan turned red, turned over. For some reason, she looked dazed. Wonder what she is thinking about. Wild Dog Taoist saw it, an inexplicable expression flashed past his dog face, slowly lowered his head. Zhou Yixian said, "All right, don't imagine things, let's go in." Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist nodded. The three of them walked gingerly to the entrance of the derelict entrance, saw that in the small courtyard, the vegetation withered, extremely dilapidated, everywhere was darkness and nothing there, but it seemed like behind every shadow, there was a pair of cold eyes looking at them. The cold wind blew, it was really an uncanny, unearthly ghostly atmosphere. Zhou Yixian swallowed his saliva, lightly walked in. Their footsteps stepped onto the grasses in the courtyard, in the silence, though they were extremely careful but they still made very light footsteps sounds, resounded in their own ears, it seemed to be louder many times more than in the day. As they went near that mortuary, their heartbeats could not help but palpitated, Xiao Huan even wondered how could her heartbeats be so loud, afraid that others might hear it too. And it was also at this time, the house which was pitch dark, a sound, although light but right now like thunder in their eyes, suddenly started, a burning ball of fire, lighted up suddenly, and that fire color was an uncanny faint dark green. Chapter 159 The Way of Ghost. Zhou Yixian and the rest were shocked. In this unearthly night in an instant they felt, the rays behind them were like stabs, even their hairs were standing up. That bit of dim dark green otherworldly fire in the house, was quietly burning, from the gap between the house it slowly illuminated, an unexplainable mystery, even the night breeze around them sounded more and more like ghost wailings. While the three of them were nonplussed and thought they were being discovered by the person in the house, that dim dark green fire after being lighted was quiet and did not have any reaction, the three of them outside the house did not even dare to breathe out loud. After a long time, after confirming that the dim dark green fire did not light it up because of them, they were then secretly relieved, but what followed after that, was curiosity mixed with fear. Zhou Yixian, frowning tightly, contemplated for a moment, made a gesture to Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist and then quietly moved forward, came to the side of the house. This mortuary had been abandoned for many years and had long been falling apart. He easily found a gap and crouched down, looking carefully into the house. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist also followed over, crouched down beside him and each found a gap to look quietly. In the middle of the dark house, a dark green fire was giving out light. That fire was not any oil lamp fire, it was a tiny ball of light suspended in midair, like a flame quietly burning. Mr. Ghost figure was not seen in the house, only under the faint dark green light illumination, the abandoned coffins looked especially creepy. Outside the house, Xiao Huan's face turned more pale, her teeth gently biting her lower lip, looking up, on that altar table, Zhou Yixian's son, Zhou Xingyan's memorial tablet was still there. The other tablets were still the same, lying scattered on the table, clearly although Mr. Ghost was here but he had no interest in those tablets. Zhou Yixian was relieved, seemed like when he saw his son's memorial tablet was safe and sound, he could lay down his worries. Xiao Huan suppressed her voice, whispered, "Grandfather, what do we do now?" Zhou Yixian was not those chivalrous heroes, tonight risking his life here, was all for his son's tablet. Now that he found out Mr. Ghost had no interest in this tablet, his son was safe and sound, naturally he did not wish to stay any longer. Furthermore, the place was eerie and naturally not suited for Zhou Yixian, who knows if it would hinder his cultivation. Since he had decided, Zhou Yixian turned and quietly said, "Let's go." Xiao Huan and Wild Dog both nodded. The three of them were about to turn to leave, but unexpectedly at this moment, Zhou Yixian, feeling relieved, did not pay attention to his footsteps. When he turned, he kicked something like a stick on the ground and immediately it rolled out from the courtyard, making a loud sound. The three of them froze. Xiao Huan angrily said, "Grandfather." Zhou Yixian was full of embarrassment. While he was about to make up some excuses, suddenly a cold sneer was heard from behind, like a bone-penetrating cold. The decrepit wall behind them suddenly collapsed. The darkness and dark green light instantly surged out from that house, soon to envelope them three. Zhou Yixian became pale, suddenly raised his hand, waved the yellow charm, anxiously said, "Quick, go." His mouth urgently chanted, a series of strange sounds from his mouth. At that moment when the dark green light touched his body, Zhou Yixian's yellow charm activated by the incantations, a yellowish-brown color flashed past. Zhou Yixian disappeared into the thin air. Almost at the same time, within the deep corners of the dark house, a surprised cry of, "Yi!" was heard. However, although Zhou Yixian escaped in time, the dark green light had arrived in a blink of an eye. Xiao Huan was halfway through her incantation, and not to even mention Wild Dog Taoist, At this critical moment, the incantation which he was forced to remember suddenly vanished from his mind. Staring tongue-tied, he could not even recite a single word and could only helplessly wave the yellow charm in his hand a few times, opened and closed his mouth a few times, looking comical. The green light abruptly charged up, enveloped them in. The next moment an extremely icy wind pierced into their bodies from all directions. Xiaohuan and Wild Dog Taoist felt their entire body's blood being frozen up in an instant. They could no longer resist and a strong force generated out from the house, a sound of woo and both figures sucked in, unable to resist even the slightest. The next minute, banging sounds were heard twice. Most likely it was Xiaohuan and Wild Dog Taoist's bodies that were thrown on the floor inside the house, but for some reason, they did not make any noise. The eerie house suddenly plunged into a dead silence. The long night, cold and silent, nothing moved inside or outside the house. A mist gently drifted past in the dark night, giving one a feeling of unreal. Only that unearthly fire in the house, still silently burning, reminding one of the existence of the strange things here. Xiaohuan and Wild Dog Taoist had been sucked into the house by the green light for a very long time, but since then there wasn't any sound coming out from the house, and the only one who escaped, Zhou Yixian, had also disappeared. Time in this stillness passed by minute, as if the one in the house was also especially patient, quietly waiting. In the silence, suddenly a human figure appeared at the entrance. It was Zhou Yixian. He was frowning tightly and seemed hesitant, but eventually he shook his head, sighed and slowly walked over to the house. Reaching the door, before he could think, a sound of "Jia" was heard from the door. It automatically opened. The faint green light inside silently shone onto Zhou Yixian. "Please come in," an emotionless voice rang out from inside the house. Zhou Yixian composed himself, went in. He looked around and soon found Xiaohuan and Wild Dog Taoist both lying on the ground next to the altar. A quick glance and seemed like they were not hurt, but both of them were staring with eyes wide opened at him. Their mouths moved a few times but no sound was made. It was very strange, wondered if it could be that they were controlled by some strange techniques. And the most attention-grabbing object in the house was that bit of faint green fire hanging in midair. At the moment it was above that coffin that Zhou Yixian noticed in the day, and in the coffin below it, right now Mr. Ghost's emotionless voice was heard. "Land escape strange skill. Has been long lost for many years. Didn't expect to see it again today. I wondered which master is your distinguished self be." Zhou Yixian was silent, watching that coffin, quietly said, "Both of them are young and ignorant. Your distinguished self is an exceptional master. Don't have to be so calculating with those juniors, right?" Mr. Ghost lightly said, "You flatter me. I am just a lonely ghost, dare not take the title of some exceptional master. In the day I have already told all of you not to come here again, but you all defy my order. What is the reason for it?" Zhou Yixian's eyes flickered, unhurriedly said, "This is where my deceased son's spiritual tablet is, where his spirit traveled to the afterlife. You are from the way of Ghost, how can I not be worried?" Mr. Ghost's voice suddenly paused, after a while drawled, "How do you know I am from the way of Ghost?" Zhou Yixian said, "You take shelter in a place of yin energy, sleeps in a yin coffin, also uses netherworld ghost fire to absorb the unearthly ghostly energy of this 100-years-old mortuary, nourishing your own body. This level of deep skill from the way of Ghost, one who has not immersed long in the way of Ghost for many years cannot use it." Mr. Ghost was silent for a long time, said, "Your distinguished self is really an expert. I have been disrespectful." Zhou Yixian's face had a rarely seen seriousness, said, "You are also a person who sees reason, naturally know what I was worrying. Although my dead son has passed away for many years, but this useless father cannot let him be dead without peace. But today coming over and witnessing, your distinguished self is not someone who misuse his skills, I am now also assured." Having said that, Zhou Yixian actually bowed to that coffin. Mr. Ghost sneered, his tone cold, heard from the coffin, "You don't have to lick my boots that way. Capturing human souls this kind of lowly tactic, I of course will not do it, but all of you have violated my prohibition and so are guilty." Zhou Yixian's countenance changed, he gave a dry cough and said, Actually this is a misunderstanding. Your distinguished self is an exceptional master, why?" Mr. Ghost snorted, ignoring Zhou Yixian's tactic of delaying him. The green ghostly fire in the midair suddenly shook, instantly became brighter. Zhou Yixian's face looked troubled, watched that spot of ghostly fire. Green light flashed, the fire gradually became bigger. When it grew to be the size of a fist, the whole room was already enveloped by green light. Even Xiaohuan and Wild Dog Taoist who were on the ground, their faces already reflected green. Suddenly, pong, a sound, the green light wavered, that netherworld ghost fire instantly split opened, from 1 to 5, went in 5 directions, followed closely by numerous dark red lights projected soundlessly from the green light, connected to each other, formed a 5-star formation, emitting auras of eerie ghostly energy from the midair, hit them directly in the face. Zhou Yixian's face looked solemn, his pupils slightly contracted, indistinctly looking over, there seemed to be sweat on his forehead. When the formation was slowly forming opposite him, Zhou Yixian hesitated for a moment, took 2 steps back, pulled out several yellow paper charms from his bosom and without saying he first stuck 4 on himself and then at the surrounding ground, chairs, broken rocks, he stuck on a few, it seemed disorganized but a faint response seeming to be coming from it. Just when Zhou Yixian finished his formation, Mr. Ghost's formation had also completed. At that moment, a light flashed from the 5-star formation, immediately the entire house was suddenly filled with ghosts' wails, extremely ear-piercing. Zhou Yixian trembled, exclaimed, "Ghost howl break." The ghost howl seemingly invisible but like all-conquering, from the formation a stern and sharp light broke out, the rubbles and broken woods along its path flew out upon touch, even the sturdy slabstone was slashed with a deep cut. Zhou Yixian's white hairs fluttered in the wind, both of his hands stretched out quickly, 2 yellow charms stuck above his ears, immediately the pain shown on his face receded, followed by his mouth reciting something, his right finger like a sword, stabbed the paper charm, his eyes wide open suddenly, stared at that ghost howling. The next moment, the ghost howl collided with Zhou Yixian, almost at the same time, that 4 pieces of paper charms on Zhou Yixian's body and the ones on the ground all lighted up, swiftly condensed into a bunch of green light blocking in front of Zhou Yixian. Rumble. A loud bang and Zhou Yixian's body flew out, crashed into a ruined wall and dropped down. In the house, the yellow charms floated in the air, helplessly scattering away and that 5 spots of fire above Mr. Ghost coffin, once again condensed into one, quietly burning. Zhou Yixian panted heavily, struggling for a while on the ground and slowly climbed up, laughed bitterly, "I am this old already and you are really not letting me go." Mr. Ghost after a moment of silence, said, "Your insight, experience, knowledge, all are incomparable to an ordinary person, but why is your cultivation at such a low level?" Zhou Yixian wiped off a faint dribble of blood from his mouth, indifferently said, "So what if my skills are low? There are so many people keen on cultivating Tao in the world, so many highly skilled cultivated martial artists, how many are as carefree as me?" This time Mr. Ghost was silent for a long while and then without speaking, that ghost fire suddenly shook and swiftly flew towards Xiaohuan and Wild Dog Taoist, pausing above them. Zhou Yixian was shocked and while he was panicking, that netherworld ghost fire circled around them once and flew back to Mr. Ghost's coffin. The next moment, for some inexplicable reason, Xiaohuan and Wild Dog Taoist bodies moved, at the same time crying out softly and then scrambled up, seemed like Mr. Ghost had released the spell on them. Zhou Yixian was surprised and happy, quickly spoke to the coffin, "Thank you, we will go now, go right now, in the future we will not come even if we are beaten to death." When he finished, he signaled with his eyes to Xiaohuan and Wild Dog Taoist. The 2 of them were naturally anxious to leave too, nodded earnestly but when they were about to stride off, Mr. Ghost's cold voice was suddenly heard again, "I released them, it does not mean I will spare you all." The 3 of them were surprised. Zhou Yixian asked in shock, "What did you say?" Mr. Ghost sneered, said, "The 3 of you came here again to spy out me, and even know my secret of the way of ghost, greatly violated my taboo, now I will let the 3 of you attack me together so that you all can die without regrets." Xiaohuan and the rest turned pale. Zhou Yixian had just fought with him and knew this person's skills were deep and unfathomable and he could not fight against him. He could only meekly said, "Your distinguished self is an exceptional master, know that we bear you no malice, only worrying my dead son's soul will be disturbed so then." Before he could finish, Mr. Ghost suddenly shouted, "Don't need to say any more, look out for the fire." That ghost fire in the midair again lighted up, the ghost energy once again filled up the house. Zhou Yixian's expression changed greatly, before he could speak, that ghost fire again formed the 5-star formation, a sound of shriek, it was that all-conquering ghost howl projected out again, rushing over. Wild Dog Taoist cried out in his heart, rushed before Xiaohuan. Took out his beast fang weapon and had it before him. Zhou Yixian shouted, "Can't block it, quickly avoid it," but while speaking, that ghost howl seemed to be much faster than before. In a blink it was already before Wild Dog Taoist. In that instant Wild Dog Taoist felt a powerful wind like a knife in his face, especially both of his ears felt stabbing pain, his entire being like among thousands of sharp swords, helplessly being slaughtered. Xiaohuan behind him, was heard screaming, her voice full of fear. about to go and help but was stopped by that powerful wind from beside Wild Dog's body. The ghost howl break abruptly stopped. Xiao Huan had nowhere to retreat and could not avoid. When it seemed like Xiao Huan was about to be hit by this powerful ghostly attack, at this critical juncture, suddenly a light suo was heard from outside the house. An object flashed, a black-green light like lightning flew before Xiao Huan and Wild Dog, a black stick which looked ordinary and blunt, slashing gently from top down. Suddenly the all-powerful ghost howl break vanished, the howling in the house slowly quietened down. Xiao Huan, who had just came back from gates of hell, whipped her head around, an uncontrollable joy on her face. She cried, "It's you." And almost at the same time, the netherworld ghost fires slowly fused into one. Mr. Ghost also coldly said, "You." Someone indifferently spoke from outside the door, "Yes, it is me." Following that voice, someone unhurriedly walked in, a long robe with hands clasped behind, a three-eyed gray monkey on his shoulder. It was Ghost Li. Ghost Li glanced towards the three of them. Xiao Huan was beaming and looking at him with joy. Wild Dog Taoist on the other hand looked strange, glanced at him a few times and slowly retreated to a side. Ghost Li felt bewildered but did not think much of it, unhurriedly walked to the middle of the room. The soul-absorbing stick glimmered with strange light, slowly flew back to his hand. Zhou Yixian glanced at Ghost Li, and glanced at Xiao Huan, suddenly grunted, said, "Brat, you must have long arrived at this area and actually did not render help. You know that this old man is frail and old, and still watch me face this ghost thing, really harbor sinister motives you this fellow." Xiao Huan frowned, glared at Zhou Yixian, called out, with some rebuke, "Grandfather." Ghost Li did not seem to care, looked at him, said, "If not so, I won't know you actually have some connections with that old ancestor at Qingyun Hill." Zhou Yixian's face changed, grunted. Ghost Li ignored him and slowly turned, faced that silent coffin. Mr. Ghost's voice slowly rang out, "Aren't you at Majestic Fox Mountain looking after Bai Yao? Why did you come here?" Ghost Li stared at the coffin, said, "I was about to ask you, you are not at the Wildlands Holy Temple, what are you doing here?" Mr. Ghost was silent for a moment, said, "In any case, you and I are after all from Ghost King sect. These three violated my taboo, infringed my privacy, I want to remove them, why are you obstructing?" Zhou Yixian listened from the back. Somehow his voice became louder now, loudly said, "Pei, you talked about killing so easily, don't tell me you think it is as easy as slaughtering pigs." Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist both glanced sideways at him. Zhou Yixian frowned, seemed to feel something amiss with himself too, mumbled a few words and quietened down. Ghost Li coldly spoke to the coffin, "You cannot kill them." Mr. Ghost coldly sneered, said, "Why not?" Ghost Li said, "Because I am here." Mr. Ghost paused, after a long while coldly said, "Don't tell me you are planning to come forward for them in force." Ghost Li's face was expressionless, said, "Yes, with me here, you cannot kill them." A trace of joy flitted past Zhou Yixian's face. Xiao Huan watched Ghost Li's back figure intently, biting down on her lips, her eyes particularly bright. Only Wild Dog Taoist did not look at Ghost Li, instead watched Xiao Huan for a moment from the side and then quietly stepped back. That spot of netherworld ghost fire in midair suddenly started to light up, the faint green light again diffused out. Zhou Yixian and the rest turned pale but Ghost Li was still standing there, unmoving, coldly staring at that ball of fire. The soul-absorbing stick in his hand also started to glow. Right now, in the entire house, the one that was most carefree was Xiao Wei. It seemed not concerned at all about the impending fight in front of it, peering here and there, looking at the ghost fire for a moment, and then turned and glanced at Xiao Huan, made monkey faces at her, while its hand from time to time scratching its body. Chapter 160 Secret. Facing Ghost Li, although Mr. Ghost still had not emerged from that coffin but clearly he had become much serious, that faint point of ghost fire in midair gradually became larger, casting the surrounding people's faces green. Ghost Li stared at that ball of green, his face expressionless, suddenly stepped forward. Almost at the same time Ghost Li moved, that ball of ghost fire, as if stimulated, suddenly flared but this time it did not divide itself into the 5 stars formation, instead it suddenly rose, creating a gust of strong wind with it. The dust in the mortuary fell in showers. Zhou Yixian and the rest were caught unaware, one by one started to rub their eyes. And at this increasingly tensed situation, the unearthly atmosphere in the air looked like it was about to activate some mysterious strange spell. Ghost Li, facing this mysterious Mr. Ghost, dared not let his guard down and was on high alert. Suddenly he raised his eyebrows, his body lifted abruptly into the air, almost at the same time, a rumble emitted from below the house. The entire house quaked violently, like the mountain was moving. A huge and pale skeleton giant arm broke through the flagstones, heavily smashed down on where Ghost Lee was standing previously. The black brick stones on the ground smashed into pieces, broken pieces flying. The entire room at the moment was engulfed in Ghost's howling cries. Ghost Lee in midair, that skeleton arm seemed to be manipulated by some mysterious power, sprang up and charged towards Ghost Lee. Ghost Lee frowned tightly, but there was no panic in his eyes reflecting the giant arm's fast approaching figure. When it looked like it was about to hit his body swayed and floated to the right. At that moment of hair's breadth avoided it, that giant arm crashed down, again another cloud of debris. The dense unearthly atmosphere in the house, the fierce wind piercingly cold. Zhou Yixian and the rest pressed tightly against the walls, wanted to leave but dared not move, for fear they might get hurt in this chaos. But luckily, it seemed that Mr. Ghost's attention was all on Ghost Lee. The three of them hid at the corner of the altar table. The white skeleton did not hunt for them. Only that the three of them in the chaos saw that the mortuary, which was originally not that spacious, with the addition of that huge arm out of a sudden, pursuing Ghost Lee, the place looked slightly crowded. But almost as if this was not enough, while Zhou Yixian was grumbling in his heart, the earth below rumbled with another deep groan. The faint sound sounded agitated and violent, like a fierce spirit imprisoned for a long time, finally had a chance to emerge and vent its frustration. The mortuary quaked violently, the earth erupted and stones cracked. Another identical giant arm emerged from the ground, fiercely hit towards Ghost Lee. Ghost Lee moved swiftly and swerved to avoid the two arms, both eyes concentrating tightly, but so far, he had not fought back. In the house, right now it seemed extremely crowded. The ghastly white arms moved in a flurry. The unfathomable yet horrifying scene played out in this mortuary. Despite the intense fight between Mr. Ghost and Ghost Lee, they seemed to have a tacit understanding. Their display of powers were limited to this mansion. Mr. Ghost's way of ghost skills did not extend out of the house, while Ghost Lee's movements were kept to the interior of the house. Above in the air, that ghost fire coldly burned. Under the green faint light, the white bones danced in the air. Ghost Lee's figure seemed to gradually take on some strange ghastly energy, but no matter what, so far, Mr. Ghost still was unable to do anything to Ghost Lee. Within the coffin, Mr. Ghost coldly snorted. Suddenly, that ghost fire brightened. The two huge and pursuing giant arms abruptly stopped. Then with a sound of lament, caca, piercing sounds rang out. Numerous cracks appeared on that two giant skeleton arms. The next moment turned into innumerable small pieces, the edges extremely sharp, like a shower of bones and yet like swarms of man-eating bees, blotted out the sky and covered up the earth, charged towards Ghost Lee. Zhou Yixian and the rest turned pale. Xiao Huan cried out. In the small mansion, it was already hard enough avoiding the two giant arms. Right now they had turned into showers of bone pieces, densely packed together. How could one avoid it? Ghost Lee's face was as cold as frost, staring at this sheet of bone pieces. The pieces looked to be reaching him. He suddenly dropped swiftly from the air, heading straight to the ground, his movement extremely fast, like lightning. The bone pieces braked in the air, like it was alive, made a screeching sound, stopped its momentum, made a bend and descended from the air. Ghost Lee looked like he was about to reach the ground, but before he could land properly, Ghost Lee slapped his hand on the ground. His entire body stuck close to the ground and flew out, and his direction was towards that coffin where Mr. Ghost was. That ghost fire in the air startled, struck down lightning fast and the numerous bone pieces behind. Like a wind whistling, pursued tightly, the violent storm howling. The entire house quaked violently. Ghost Lee's clothes flapped wildly in the wind, but at this moment, where there was obstacle in front and pursuing soldiers behind, he suddenly threw out the soul-absorbing black stick from his hand. That force was great, with strange powers activating it. The sinister orb at the tip of the black stick swirled with dark red, lines and dots of blood lighted up. It was a scene where evil power was at its peak. Just that, the direction where the soul-absorbing stick flew, was where Zhou Yixian and the rest were at. Zhou Yixian, Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist. Before they could react, a stream of black light suddenly rushed before them, an extremely cold blanket of air already enveloping them before it arrived. An indistinct mysterious evil power like a ferocious demon descended from the air and influencing the blood inside their bodies, a feeling of penetrating into their bodies and exiting. The next moment, the soul-absorbing stick was before them, a sound of duo stabbed into the wall beside Zhou Yixian's head, almost totally sinking in. Zhou Yixian blanched, even forgotten to curse Ghost Lee, immediately felt a cold wave traveling from his head to his feet. That black stick beside his ears, like an invisible arm, wanted to drag him in. He was terrified, forced his body to move and only then managed to breathe deeply. And this moment, that shower of bone pieces and that ball of faint ghost fire, like a wave of tsunami, suddenly abruptly stopped, froze in the air. A moment later, a faint groan was heard from the wall, a block of human-shaped earth suddenly flew out from the wall, headed towards Ghost Lee, and the numerous bone pieces, like losing their spiritual power, fell onto the ground. Only that ball of ghost fire, surged in brightness, once again floated above that piece of earth. Ghost Lee whistled lightly, his right hand waved, the soul-absorbing stick flew back, stabbed into the block of earth from the back. Immediately the earth broke, a human figure in black flashed out, drifting like a ghost, floated above to where that coffin was. It was Mr. Ghost. The soul-absorbing stick slowly landed, went back to Ghost Lee. Ghost Lee stared at Mr. Ghost, did not make any move. Mr. Ghost slowly turned and looked at Ghost Lee, suddenly said, "How did you find out my place of concealment?" Ghost Lee was silent, did not answer but only looked at him coldly. Mr. Ghost's black veil moved slightly, nodded his head and said, "All right, we may not be friends in the future, of course you will refuse to say, just that we are not yet finished today. I'd like to see you who is rumored to have the 3 great factions, true ways in your body. How exactly is your cultivation?" Ghost Lee's pupils slightly contracted, although he took Mr. Ghost by surprise by using soul-absorbing stick to attack where he was concealing, considered having the upper hand, but his expression did not look relaxed at all. Intentionally or unintentionally, the soul-absorbing stick stabbed into the earth block, but Mr. Ghost was like an apparition, an empty space. He could not tell the effect of the soul-absorbing evil power on him. This person was mysterious and unfathomable. It was really something Ghost Lee had not encountered before. Watching the confrontation between the two people, it seemed like there would be another fierce fight again. Zhou Yixian calmed his frightened self, quickly pulled Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist. Both of them, startled, knew that it would be extremely dangerous with such strange powers battling each other, hurriedly found a hole in the already dilapidated wall and scurried out. Before leaving, Xiao Huan seemed to remember something, stretched out her hand and took Zhou Xingyan's tablet with her too. The 3 of them left in succession. Ghost Lee and Mr. Ghost were clearly aware, but Ghost Lee did not react, and as a great foe was before Mr. Ghost, he seemed couldn't be bothered about them. Just that after they left, howling sounds were heard again from the house, sands and stones flew past. Zhou Yixian and the rest outside the broken walls were pushed several kai back by the violent winds. Zhou Yixian pulled Xiao Huan back a distance, a full 3 zhongs away before turning back to gaze at the house, but at such a far distance, he could not feel the intense fight going on between the 2 martial artist experts. Seemed like they were still controlling their powers within the house. Looking from a distance, strange lights flashed from the house, other than the initial faint green, right now gold, red, white, dark green and other strange lights also began. If not for the dense, ghastly and murderous atmosphere, the scene was rather beautiful. Xiao Huan stared at that house, whispered to Zhou Yixian, who was getting ready to run, said, "Grandfather, are we just going to leave like this? I don't think it's very nice." Zhou Yixian and Wild Dog Taoist, who was beside him, were shocked, turned around and looked at Xiao Huan. Zhou Yixian frowned and said, "Silly girl, what are you thinking of? Those 2 are monsters who kill people like flies. We are lucky to escape with our lives. Why do you still want to stay here for?" Xiao Huan hesitated a moment, said, but after all, to save us, he then. Quote. Wild Dog Taoist looked at her, did not speak. Zhou Yixian impatiently said, "I say, why are you so muddle-headed? Ghost Lee is highly skilled, what is there to worry? Besides, they are dog eat dog." "Oh, no, one is called Ghost Lee, the other Mr. Ghost, should be called Ghost Fighting Ghost. They ghost fighting ghost, what concern it is to us, quickly go, quickly go." Speaking, he pulled Xiao Huan's hand and walked off. Xiao Huan hesitated for a moment but eventually was pulled away by Zhou Yixian. Wild Dog Taoist turned to glance at that mortuary flashing with strange lights. Indistinctly whistling of fierce winds could be heard. His eyes complicated, did not speak, paused for a moment, then turned and chased Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan. In the mortuary, the time to brew a cup of tea had passed. The ramshackle mansion right now was even more ruined. Broken stones of the dilapidated walls, even the ruined floor was like being plowed by cows after an earthquake, the earth uneven and lumpy, stone pieces suddenly sticking out, not even a proper place to stand. And Ghost Lee and Mr. Ghost were both floating in the air right now, temporarily ceased fighting, staring at each other. Both seemed to be slightly panting. Only Xiao Wei on Ghost Lee's shoulder looked impatient, yawned a few times lazily, stretched itself. Mr. Ghost suddenly spoke, "Can't imagine your skills have actually improved so much, just only 10 years of time. And you are able to merge Taoism, Buddhism, evil the three factions' true ways into one. That is really not easy. Ghost Lee looked at this mysterious figure in black, coldly said, I also did not expect, you are not from the evil sect and instead from the southern border shaman art, the way of ghost. Dark red light suddenly appeared in his eyes, he stared at Mr. Ghost, his voice turned ice cold, said, since you are well versed in the way of ghost, then the soul return unusual art for Bai Yao, you. Before he could finish, Mr. Ghost already interrupted, you are wrong, although I know a little of the way of ghost skills but soul return unusual art is still the southern border black shaman tribe secret art. I do not know it, else if not based on my friendship with Ghost King, I would have already saved Miss Bai Yao. Ghost Lee looked at him coldly, the red glow glimmering uncertainty in his eyes, he seemed to be deliberating over Mr. Ghost's words. Instead Mr. Ghost, who was silent for a moment, suddenly spoke, since tonight you insisted to protect those three, given that we are all from Ghost King sect, I will let them go this time. There is no meaning to us fighting here, why not we just stop now? Ghost Lee sneered in his heart. He was no longer that naive youth from the past, the perilous fight just now, if his cultivation was low or if he had been careless, he would have died numerous times, and at that time, definitely no one would say things like we are all from Ghost King sect. Mr. Ghost was really an unfathomable character, although Ghost Lee was not afraid of him but that battle earlier on, he knew that this person's skills were abnormal and was really someone not easy to deal with, he did not wish to be overhasty and so nodded and indifferently said, that is good too. Mr. Ghost slowly descended and landed, the mortuary was in a ruin, most of the coffins were all torn apart, only that coffin at that yin place was still intact. Mr. Ghost landed on it, was silent for a moment, said, what is your intention for coming to Qing Yun Hill this time? Ghost Lee coldly said, then what are you here for? Mr. Ghost faintly said, the world is in a chaos, it is the troubled times, the evil beasts are on a rampage, the battle between good faction and the evil beasts is inevitable, how can I miss it? Ghost Lee looked at him and said, as what you said, the good faction and the evil beasts, who will win? A glint suddenly flashed in Mr. Ghost's eyes, he seemed to recall something, said, the evil beasts are formidable, contrary to everyone's expectation, especially for that beast deity, until now no one has seen his moves, moreover his cultivation level but to be able to dominate the innumerable powerful demonic beasts, presumably this person must be an unparalleled formidable figure. This big battle, I'm afraid the demonic beasts have a 70% odds. Ghost Lee's pupils slightly contracted, he was silent for a long time, said, then 30% from the good faction, don't tell me it's on Zhu Xian formation. Mr. Ghost smiled and said, that is right. Qing Yun Hill Zhu Xian sword formation really makes a difference, after 1,000 years, it is still the world's top supreme Taoism formation, if the good faction wishes to win, then they will have to put their hopes on this sword formation, if not there will not be that many good faction righteous people, instead of going other places, all of them came to Qing Yun Hill. Ghost Lee silent with his head lifted, his expression complex, seemed to have recalled some things, pain indistinct on his face. Mr. Ghost saw his expression, suddenly said, although you started out from Qing Yun but some of Qing Yun's secrets, most likely you are still unaware. Ghost Lee's countenance changed, turned to look at Mr. Ghost, as if he wanted to stare through this person, after a while, he drawled, please advise. Mr. Ghost looked at Ghost Lee, his tone calm but his eyes seemed to convey a deeper meaning, Qing Yun Hill Zhu Xian sword formations might exceeds the mortal and enters the sage, it is sufficient to slay the evil and eliminate the demons, for 1,000 years it has always been the treasured weapon of guarding Qing Yun Hill. Legend says that the sword formation was born out of that volume of nameless ancient scroll that Qing Yun Hill Qing Yunzi founder obtained. Until 1,000 years ago the emergence of the peerless genius Qing Yi who went into seclusion at illusory moon cave, for 13 years, emerged white-haired, personally invented this, he gathered the spiritual energies from Qing Yun's 7 mountain summits as the formation, transformed the murderous energies of the world's living things as the sword and becomes invincible in the world. His voice paused and then sounding slightly erratic but his pair of eyes firmly glued on Ghost Lee, slowly said, and this astounding unparalleled formation is inseparable from one celestial weapon. Ghost Lee exclaimed, the ancient sword, Zhu Xian. Mr. Ghost nodded and said, it is indeed. Where exactly did Zhu Xian came from, it has always been a mystery, I'm afraid even those people at Qing Yun Hill won't be able to explain. But one thing is for sure, the first appearance of Zhu Xian ancient sword was when Qing Yi founder emerged from his seclusion in illusory moon cave for 13 years, holding that sword in his hands. And all along, that celestial weapon is never kept closely with Qing Yun's sect head but instead placed in the illusory moon cave at the back of Qing Yun Hill. Mr. Ghost stopped. In the mortuary, a silence temporarily descended. Ghost Lee looked at him intently, slowly said, "How did you know so much?" Mr. Ghost waved his hand and said, "You don't have to bother about me, but what I have said to you is indeed the facts. Therefore the secret of Qing Yun Zhu Xian sword formation, most likely is within the illusory moon cave that only Qing Yun sect head can enter." He smiled and said, "Do you understand?" Ghost Lee did not speak, only stared silently at that person. After a long while, coldly said, "Who exactly are you?" Mr. Ghost clasped his hands behind his back standing, slowly said, "In short, remember that I am not your enemy, that is all." Ghost Lee looked at that person for a moment, suddenly turned and slowly floated out. When his figure was about to disappear, his voice seemed to be heard but it also sounded like the wind, indistinct. Mr. Ghost stood alone in the dark, motionless. That faint ghost fire slowly darkened and finally completely extinguished. The mansion lapsed into silence again. Just after a while, the dark place where a human figure was, a low, low sneer was heard.